From Silicon Valley to the Spanish shore, fighting for freedom, but they want something more. 10 months in prison just for speaking his mind. Now they're coming back trying to leave him behind. 109 years for following the law. Most corrupt case that you ever saw. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free, free Roger now. Hired the best lawyers, did everything right. Still they raided offices in the dead of night. Used his own compliance as evidence of guilt. Now his freedom hangs on the empire they build. Speaking truth to power comes with a price, but we won't let them sacrifice. Oh, they can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free, free Roger now. When they come for one of us, they come for all. Either stand together now or watch freedom fall. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free, free Roger now.
They wanna give him 109 for following the legal line. Bitcoin Jesus paid his dues, now they tryna make him lose. Free fear, can't silence the truth. Free fear, breaking their own rules. Free fear, from prison to Spain, now they doing it again. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. Free fear. Free fear. Blockstream got the way back then. 1 meg blocks, remember when? Big blocks meant decentralized. Small blocks kept us paralyzed. Now they're coming for the king, using laws like puppet strings. Spanish prison, McAfee died, making sure Ver stays inside. They can raid the lawyers, what? They can seize the files, yeah. But they can't stop crypto, running wild, running wild. Brownstone dropping truth bombs daily. System going crazy lately. Trying to lock up Bitcoin Jesus, but they cannot defeat us. Fear saw freedom in the code. Now they wanna block his road, but the movement's too damn strong, and this persecution's wrong. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Down on 9 years for following legal advice. That's not justice, that's a warning. Free Roger Ver.
He bought a one-way ticket to freedom, traded red tape for open seas. Bitcoins in his pocket, dreams of peace. Now they label him a thief. Said he hid the truth from the paperman, but the real crime, he walked away again. They try to cage the free again. You can exile a man, but not the flame. Roger lit a fire they'll never tame. Freedom's not a form to sign. It's a line they cross every time. They called him Bitcoin Jesus, now they wanna crucify. Weaponized indictments to make the next one think twice. This ain't justice, it's control, playing God with your soul. Yeah, they're coming for the rebels with their lies dressed up as law. But truth don't hide behind a bench, it lives in every freedom song. Let them try, we won't be banned. The people's will won't pay their rent. As law, but truth don't hide behind a bench, it lives in every freedom song. Let them try, we won't be banned. The people's will won't pay their rent. Oh, they said he lied, but the truth, he just left their broken table, and they can't stand a man who walks away still able.
Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is Season 2, Episode 12. Let me see if I can fix this thing with the screen. That's interesting that it's doing that. Anyway, Season 2, Episode 12. This is Day 11 of the 40-Day Fast to Free Roger. let me actually resize this. Let me see here. There we go. That's better. So day 11, it gets getting interesting with the fast for sure, which I will talk about the update for that. Today I don't have quite as much to talk about, but I certainly do have some things to go over. In particular, the website that people can go to help promote the Roger's situation, as well as to participate or join in with the fast itself. As we always do, the current status is that Roger is still facing 109 years in prison, and he has now been stuck in Spain for 347 days. So, and this is now day 11. And I actually want to point out that tomorrow will mark the 1 year anniversary of when I had Roger on my podcast to discuss hijacking Bitcoin. So I will probably share that episode, or at least clips from that episode, but it's hard to believe that was almost a year ago, and in roughly 20 days it will be a year that Roger has been stuck in Spain. The normal disclaimers: this fast is my personal effort. It's not an official part of the Free Roger Now campaign. This is something I'm completely doing on my own. I'm sure Roger has his own stuff that they're doing kind of behind the scenes working on the case, but I wanted to do this as a way to bring attention to the case and to keep the public pressure on, and so that this case gets put to the top of the pile, because of course the DOJ and the administration has a lot of things on their plate, and so we want to make sure that this case gets to the top of the pile, and to maintain that pressure regardless of who ends up being in the administration, because you never know with these things who's going to even be in these top spots. Often people get booted out, so we want to make sure that no matter who is there, everybody is aware of what's going on with Roger's case. So this is the 5th episode that I've done, 5th podcast specifically dedicated to this cause, and I encourage you to go back and look at the others. So I'm not going to rehash old information. There's quite a bit of content. In fact, I was looking back at this today. I think last week we did 4 podcasts, and it was something like 12 hours, or no, actually closer to 16 hours of content. So of course, not all of that was, me presenting slides. A lot of that was the Q&A that we do at the end, which I would argue is, possibly some of the more important content. But in any event, if you go back to the first episode, Season 2, Episode 7, that will actually give you a pretty broad overview of what the case is all about, what Roger's case is all about, but also what fasting is all about, because I know a lot of people are concerned if they hear 40-day fast and they think immediately, oh, gee, you can't survive more than 3 days without food or whatever. So I go into the high-level information about fasting, which, by the way, I think is probably one of the most important tools that we can do for improving our health, and also for self-empowerment, which is part of why, as we've been doing these episodes, I talk about what's going on biologically and everything else, because I've wanted to educate people about fasting for a long time. I did over 200 days of fasting in 2022, 2023. My longest fast so far has been 38 days. So this will be a personal record, but I've spent, thousands of hours at this point researching this, and then, probably overall, not just considering those 2 years, a year fasting. So I've learned quite a bit about it, and want to really share that with people, along with using it as a tool to raise awareness. The second day was a real focus on who Roger is as a person. And again, the point of this is not only to educate everyone watching this, but so that hopefully you will also help spread the word on this, because Roger has had a huge impact, not just in crypto and with investing in Bitcoin, but also as a humanitarian and a supporter of liberty causes, and a supporter of people who are in distress. And the reason people don't know about these things is because he did it privately. His intention wasn't to do it for fame, but now, actually, given his legal situation, that might help propel him and help improve his opportunity and chance to get a pardon or have the case dismissed. On day 3, I talked about hijacking Bitcoin. And really, this was kind of 2 days in a row where there's kind of a part one on hijacking Bitcoin. And then in addition to talking about fasting, I talked about kind of the top nutrition lies. Because when you fast, you obviously have a lot of time to spend thinking about and understanding your relationship with food. And for me, I like to research the root causes of things. And in that process, you learn that basically everything that we've been told about nutrition is not only a lie, but it was a malicious lie. It wasn't a case of, well, the scientists were doing the best that they could at the time, and when they got new information, they changed their mind. That actually has nothing to do at all with what happened. It was malicious and usually pushed by corporate interests behind the scenes, who then manipulated public health and public health officials, and then lo and behold, this became public health policy and in textbooks and guidelines and so forth, and doctors were pushing it. And so it's important for people to understand that, to not be naive and think that frankly, that the health situation with the obesity epidemic that we have and type 2 diabetes and all of these other things, to think that it was just an honest mistake. Until you learn that it was malicious, you're going to continue to give power to the people that created the problem. And that is something that we need to stop, regardless of what the issue is, not just health. So again, that was kind of 2 days in a row on that. And then on Tuesday, this is when we kind of upped the ante. So when I started this podcast, when I started this journey, it was going to be a 7+ day fast. And I knew it was going to be more than 7 days, but then after thinking about it and looking at a lot of things that are going on from a timing perspective with Roger's case and everything else, I decided to extend it out to 40 days. And you'll see, why that's kind of strategically important and why that might make this something helpful to raise awareness as we get through certain milestones in the fast related to other events and other things that are going on. And then I highlighted and I said how you might be able to help, but I still had this website that was kind of in draft mode. So we've really fleshed it out, and that's really what I'm going to be spending some time today showing you. And as always, the whole point of what I do in general, just outside of not just related to this effort, this fast for Roger, but in general, everything that I've been doing with fighting CBDCs and warning people about technocracy is really to help people to take back control of their own lives. So it doesn't matter what any politician does. It doesn't matter what anybody does or anybody says. We have the ability to control our own thoughts, our own feelings, and our own actions. And we make 30,000 decisions a day. So our ability to tweak and understand that is how we improve ourselves, and that's how we improve the world. And so I think fasting is one way of doing that. I'm going to be, branching off from here and going into some other areas in the months ahead, but also moving away from state-backed currency and central bank currency so that you can trade voluntarily without all of these third parties in the middle is another way to empower your life. As far as events, the next event is April the 25th. It's Liberty Forum. I'll be a panel on what happened to crypto adoption. And then interestingly, I'll be at ETH giving a keynote speech on the 40th day of my fast. So that is going to be interesting. I don't know what it's going to be like to give a 20-minute talk in front of a large group of people while having fasted for 40 days. So that one will probably be one for the record books, but I thought that was actually a pretty good way to cap everything off. And so that may turn out to be a more entertaining talk than I'm even aware of. And then just a couple of days, 3 days after the fast is over, Roger has his motion to dismiss hearing. This is in LA on May the 12th at 1:30 p.m. at the United States District Court. The judge is Michael Fitzgerald, and so I plan to attend that. I encourage other people to attend as well, although my hope would be that Roger's case is dismissed or he's pardoned by then. So I'm buying refundable tickets and a refundable hotel, and I encourage you to do the same. In fact, because kind of putting that out there that I hope that that's the case, but also there are a whole variety of reasons that these hearings can be changed in terms of time. In fact, Roger originally targeted and requested a date of January the 6th, and I think it's been changed once or twice. It was then going to be in March, and then that got changed again. So again, refundable tickets. And then we have Pork Fest, which is June the 16th to June the 22nd. And I'll do a whole podcast on Pork Fest, probably either next week or the week after. But this is going to be a phenomenal event. And if you haven't already been, this is really the biggest Liberty gathering in the world at this point. 2,000 to 3,000 people for an entire week. It's at a campground. And what's cool about it is not only there are, hundreds of talks going on and on a variety of different topics, but I'm going to be co-hosting one of the largest tents at the event with Mineratopia. And so we're going to have a whole area that can accommodate 50 people to do talks and panels and so forth. And we're going to be really focusing on privacy coins and the adoption of cryptocurrency. And privacy is now key. So a lot of OGs were onboarded by Roger. I learned about Bitcoin from Roger at another Free State event called Liberty Forum, but Roger was there in 2012 giving people physical Bitcoin. And at the time, they were only worth $7 to $11. The people that are at this event this entire week, they're really not using fiat. They're using alternative currencies. So there's a whole place called Agora Alley. So if you're buying food, if you're buying whatever merchandise, T-shirts, whatever it is that people happen to be selling, people are using alternative currencies. And so this might actually be the highest concentration of actual use of cryptocurrency. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity to introduce people to Zano and some of the other interesting projects that are going on. If you want to go, I encourage you to buy a ticket now, and more importantly, either reserve a campground or get an Airbnb or a hotel. Reserve those sooner rather than later because they will sell out. I'm personally not a camper, so we always get an Airbnb for the family and everything, and make a big kind of week out of it. But you can get a 10% discount, and the discount code is FreeRoger. So that's kind of the background. And so today, this is a slide from the last podcast 2 days ago. Roger changed the world. So again, the highlight here is he's just not Bitcoin. He's all about doing a whole variety of things to help promote voluntary interactions, whether that's through investing or through nonprofits or through supporting individuals, supporting people like Ross Ulbricht through legal fees and everything else. What I'm going to show you now is the website. So this is let's see if I can get this working properly. All right, so this is the website that we have. If you go to daylightfreedom.org and you click on the Fast for Roger site tab, you'll get the whole site. So what my goal is here is to put a whole bunch of content that people can share, and for this to be a sign-up page for people to be able to join the fast as well. So, there's kind of just general information at the top of the page. And then I have down here 3 really important videos. I think these are probably 3 of the most important videos. If you're trying to educate people to get up to speed about the situation, there's the Bitcoin Jesus documentary, which is in the middle. This was produced by the same guy that did the Plandemic movies, and it's just a phenomenal 20-minute or so video, and it's Roger in his own words. So that's the best way to kind of get information out. Is Roger's very, very well spoken, and no one can speak better about his situation than he can. On the left, there's a video which is a compilation of testimonials that I put together from people, leaders in the Liberty community that have been impacted by Roger. Jeffrey Tucker, Saul the Agorist, Joel Valenzuela, Sterling Lujan, John Bush all gave short clips there, but I think those are important to watch and to also to share with people so that people, again, understand who Roger is. And then the last video on the right here is a video about Roger's humanitarian efforts and some of the people that he supported all over the globe. So these 3 together, I think, are great in terms of watching and sharing to help people understand what's going on. Then we have a kind of a manifesto, if you will, that we put together on this page. And then on the right here, there's the Join the Global Fast to Free Roger. So I know a lot of you have already fasted. So what I want to do with this is ultimately build a counter that shows the total number of days fasted. But if you come here and you simply fill out the form, your name, email address, number of days you pledge to fast, and we're also giving away, Xano has offered to support, one Xano for the first 500 people that sign up to participate in this fast. So if you've already participated or you plan to participate or whatever, I encourage you to come here, sign up. I mean, even if you only plan on fasting for a half a day, it doesn't matter. Every amount helps, and it shows kind of a true commitment to raising awareness to this cause. And then down here, if you could leave a testimonial about Roger's impact, either on you personally or on the world, or any comments that you have about the lawfare against him, and then we'll take those testimonial quotes. I don't just put in the notes if you don't want me to put your name, but I want to build up a library of those and probably turn those into memes and something that we can do to share to show how much broad-based support there is from the community. Then if you go further down the site, there's an opportunity for you to see kind of a rolling list of all of the episodes so far related to this fast. And so this is a great way to do this. I've also created a playlist on YouTube to make it easy to just get to the content related to this fast, or there's also an option to link and view that on Rumble. And you've probably noted, if you were here at the very beginning, that I've created a lot of songs. In general, I've probably created definitely over 10 AI songs, not all specific to Roger, but I've actually been creating AI songs based on the content of each of my podcasts. So I'll actually go back through at the end of the podcast and take the transcript and then turn that transcript into an AI song. So to keep kind of a rolling narrative going. I just think it's an interesting way. It's just an alternative way to communicate some of this information. I was only able to get 3 of the songs up so far, but you can see those songs as well on the site, and you're welcome to share those, download those, repurpose them, remix them. This is the same with all of this content. I mean, the whole point of this is to get the content out there. It's not about driving traffic to me or me. I'm not monetizing any of this content. The entire point of it is to raise awareness. I've also created 64 memes. I think looks like we have about 10 of them up now, but I suppose the others will be coming up soon. So just check back to the site. But these are 10 memes, and this first batch of 64 memes are all focused on lawfare. And as a recap, remember who we're trying to influence here, because I know if you're watching this, there's a pretty good chance you're, an anarchist, an ANCAP, a libertarian, an agorist, whatever it happens to be. There's a pretty decent chance you're not hardcore MAGA. You might be, in which case that's great. This all applies. But we're really trying to influence Trump and Attorney General Bondi. And so, kind of the delicate nature of this is that, yes, it was the DOJ that went after Roger, but it's just kind of a point of fact. This whole lawfare was initiated under Joe Biden. And at least my opinion on this is that the determination to actually convene a grand jury and indict Roger stemmed from Biden's Executive Order 14067. And that executive order authorized the U.S. to pursue a CBDC, and it was the executive order that authorized this entire crackdown on all of crypto. So everything from debanking to people like Ian Freeman being arrested to the SEC cracking down on everything, all of that. And I've written articles about this, and I have other separate podcasts that you can go back and look at. And I have a Brownstone article on the unfinished war on crypto, where I go through all the details on this. So that was the DOJ and the IRS in Roger's case that did this, but it was all under Biden. It was all politically motivated, and it was motivated to stop Roger from being a force in spreading peer-to-peer digital cash and alternatives to CBDCs, or whatever central bank currency before CBDCs, and then central bank digital currency. Roger's really the biggest threat because he onboarded more people to Bitcoin. The whole industry wouldn't exist. He also was the number 2. He was the first investor and number 2 person in XRP. He's funded not just the Bitcoin ecosystem. He's funded privacy coins, and now he's working on Xano and other projects that are continuing the mission of allowing people to engage voluntarily and to trade freely. And so that's why I believe he was targeted. So obviously the new administration has a lot on their plate, but it's critical that this gets to the top of the pile, because one of the things that hasn't happened, while the SEC has dropped a lot of meme coin cases and a lot of other things have been addressed, and exchanges and everything else, none of these criminal cases have been addressed. So it's not only just Roger, it's also Ian Freeman, it's Roman Storm, and others. So I think it's important that Pam Bondi in the AG's office and Trump understand that while Trump may have rescinded Biden's executive order, he did not rescind the effects and the lawfare caused by the executive order, particularly as it relates to criminal cases. And so this is why I'm doing this, we need to keep a sustained pressure, and I need all the help. This is a group effort. I mean, I can only reach so many people, but together we can reach a lot of people, and we want to influence MAGA people in a way that they'll understand in their words, which is that, lawfare bad under Biden. Trump, said he was going to clean up lawfare. The lawfare against Roger is similar to the lawfare against Trump. Here's a big win. Shouldn't be a lot of political capital involved. This should actually be kind of a no-brainer. So that's really the gist of that. And so there's going to be more content. There are going to be more memes loaded. I'll be loading up more songs and more information. But I wanted this to be a site that people could share. And I encourage you to sign up right now if you can, and pledge to fast. And again, the first 500 people that do this will receive Zano. I will do next week. If you're wondering how to get Zano or whatever, I'll do a tutorial next week, and we'll put it on the site as well as to how to download a wallet and how to find your address so that you can submit it in this form. But you can fill out this form now without the Zano address, and I will email you and make sure that we get everything set up with Zano down the line. So back to the presentation, I'm going to switch over to the fasting update before we get into the Q&A. So, I haven't done this for a couple of days. So I'm on day 11 of the fast. Actually, technically, I'm now on day 12. So 7:30 p.m. kind of marks the hour. I wanted to make sure that, when I was having this podcast, that based on when the podcast starts, that, the full day had been completed, so that I actually had the experience and could describe exactly what was going on at that point in time, because there are some interesting things with fasting and some key milestones. So the key milestone occurs really on day 10, and this is where there's a growth hormone boost. And so I'll explain more about that, but that's kind of the exciting development for today. So, since the podcast on Tuesday, on day 10, we saw a growth hormone surge and fat burn kind of produced and enhanced. And this is the thing that, actually, I shouldn't say this is the thing people don't know about fasting. Most people know absolutely nothing about fasting. But I think the most popular misconception, if you don't know anything about it, is that if you don't eat, your body will, eat itself and you'll die, and it, tear apart your muscle and all of these other things. Now, there is a difference between fasting and starving. And starving is when you get to the point where you've exhausted your fat reserves, then your body does start going after your muscles and your bones and your tissues and everything else. And that's a dangerous situation. I'm nowhere near that level. And in fact, almost no one in America is near that level. We have a lot in reserves. Even if we don't look like we have reserves, we have more reserves than we think. And there are a lot of people who are thin that are actually fat thin because they have excess visceral fat around their organs, which is actually the most dangerous kind of fat. And so, but the mechanism at play here is that you get into this phase where your body is burning fat. It's burning the fat, it's taking the adipose tissue, processing it through the liver, and it's creating ketones. So you're able to operate primarily on fat as your fuel source. And if you think about it for a minute, okay, so what is fat? Fat is stored energy. Well, kind of there's a presumption there that we have this mechanism where we're storing excess fat because we have a mechanism to be able to use it. Once you get into a prolonged state of fasting, certain things kick in, like growth hormones, where your body actually protects the muscle. It protects the necessary tissues and focuses exclusively on burning fat. So you're not dealing with a huge amount of muscle loss. In fact, I've been researching this a lot, there's the guy who holds the record for fasting fasted for 382 days, and so he didn't die, and he also surprisingly didn't have like a catastrophic amount of muscle loss. He had some muscle loss, but not much, and it's because of this process, and it's because of what goes on when you're doing the fasting. But this is also why it's important not to eat anything during a fast, and because if you're doing anything to disrupt this process, then you don't have the advantages of autophagy. You don't have the advantages of having this growth hormone surge. So this is why if you're doing a restricted calorie diet or whatever, you're not going to get some of the critical benefits that happen at this point. So this is why day 10 was huge. Day 11, resilience peaks. The body's fully adapted to fasting. Energy stabilizes. Mental focus starts to improve. And I'll share my personal experience with this because it's, and depending on what it is, like right now I'm a little tired, so I probably am slurring my words a little bit, but I'm physically tired. I'm not mentally tired, but it's really interesting to see what goes on during the day and at various points in time, and the different strategies that you can use to kind of deal with whatever's coming up during the fast. So to go into more specifics, so what's actually going on day 10, again, it's the growth hormone surge. You see that, so the growth hormone levels surge, and in fact, fasting can actually increase growth hormone by up to 5x. So this is huge. So I'm at the point right now where like this is just huge enhanced fat metabolism. So like today I went for a walk. I did have quite a bit of energy at 3 o'clock or so. So I'm just checking now. So I've walked almost 10,000 steps today. The weather was pretty decent outside, but I mean, I'm based on my calorie, what the thing says on calories, I'll probably burn 3,500 calories a day. But that will be literally a pound of almost entirely fat. So I can't express enough how huge that is from a weight loss perspective. So that I'm burning pure fat, I'm operating on fat, and I've got this huge 5x amount of growth hormone that is also helping to preserve my lean muscle. So here are some pro tips for day 10. So you want to prioritize sleep and avoid stress. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting for me. I've noticed like I have a hard time now falling asleep before 2 or 3 in the morning. And I just have so I've kind of shifted my schedule. So I'll do a lot of work like through the night. Like I have just an incredible amount of focus and ability to do things up until, say 1 o'clock. And then I go to bed and, toss and turn for a bit. And then I do get quality sleep when I finally sleep, and interesting things with dreams and all of that. But you do want to minimize, you want to prioritize sleep and avoid stress. And along with that is meditation. And I have found, and I think this tip is really huge. You want to stay grounded. And I don't know if this is your experience. I can't imagine that it's unique to me, but I've noticed I do some of my best thinking when I'm out for a walk. And when I say out for a walk, the important part is outside for a walk. I have a treadmill desk, and it's just not even remotely the same. I mean, I live in New Hampshire, so it's necessary. It's probably the only option that I have in the dead part of winter, but whenever I can, I walk outside, and I'm immediately revitalized walking outside. And that's whether it's cloudy or sunny. I mean, the sun helps too. If there's sun, that's an added benefit. But like yesterday, I was tired, but my body said, instead of laying down and go for a rest, go for a walk. And then the minute I started walking, my energy levels absolutely surged. So I recommend that not only for fasting, but in general, but it is absolutely huge. It's been a benefit for me to keep my energy levels up so that I can continue to do work on these podcasts. And so, we've already talked about this. So the spotlight from a fasting perspective, I'm going to do these spotlights just to educate people on what some of the really breakaway things are that happen on fast that no one would think about. And I'm also going to do in the future segments on, all right, well, what happens to your skin? What happens if you have, like type 2 diabetes? I'll go into specific conditions and explain kind of what goes on with the body at various time points during the fast, because like I've said before, I actually think fasting is probably the single biggest threat to big pharma, because if people started doing this regularly or kicked it off, I mean, you can reverse type 2 diabetes during a long-term fast, documented. And by the way, you won't even find this information on even through AI or certainly on Google, because most of this information is suppressed, and most of the studies that have been done on fasting, there's no big pharma or big food, or there's no corporate entity that has any reason to fund research on the topic of, if people do nothing and fast, will that improve their health? No one has an incentive for that to turn out positively, but it does turn out there have people that have been studying this for decades, and there is a treasure trove of data. And I've looked at that. I'm even considering putting together an AI to go through that data and make it sortable and searchable, because you can't find it through traditional AIs. So these are the big kind of frequently asked questions during this phase. You will have increased thirst, by the way. So I had to wake up. Actually woke up in the middle of the night with dry mouth, and I drink fluids constantly. Right now, because my taste buds changed, it's not coffee, but I've switched to tea and then to water with electrolytes. And so I drink consistently throughout the day, but even still, I woke up in the middle of the night thirsty and had to get additional water. There is fatigue. That is true. I mean, I'm pretty fatigued right now. Like, I couldn't sleep, but I am fatigued. I mean, I'm not like super high energy. Day 11, there's an energy surge. I would say with that, I found the energy surge while I was walking. I can't say that there was an energy surge throughout the day. I've been kind of muddling my way through, doing everything that I needed to do to get the website up and to get these slides together. And there are hunger pangs, and that is the case. And these fluctuate. I mean, there during the fast, there will be entire days where you're not hungry at all. Today is not one of those days, and in part it's because everything that's going on with the growth hormone boost and everything else. So, and just kind of a thought topic is health freedom a right, or is it a fight? So, again, I've said many times, I think public health is a death cult, and part of the reason that I think that is that I've studied it. And when I go to start something and study it, I go back to the source. When did it start? Who was involved? What was the history of it? And when you look at the history of medicine, it's very much been this. It is not a customer merchant relationship. It is very much a top down. I don't know if you want to call it patriarchal, whatever it is, but it's no. The doctors have the ultimate say. They're above you, and they're the experts, and you're just a patient to them. Kind of a distant thing that they have kind of intellectual curiosity about. And I say that because you can look at some of the things, historically. Doctors just looked at patients as people that they could experiment on. If you look at what's gone on in mental asylums, which is a whole other rabbit hole you can go down, things like performing lobotomies to cure depression, and a whole lot of the medical experimentation that went on. But there was always this kind of, that the doctors are above the people. The idea that we have medical freedom is actually kind of a new concept with respect to medicine. And so my approach is, which and I'm going to be increasingly, even after the fast, adamant about, is there should be no pussyfooting around this. We should actually literally stop listening to the people that have been killing us, and we should actually start ridiculing them and explaining to people that these are people that have been indoctrinated to push things that are bad for our health, and not just, say, well, maybe this doctor's wrong, but maybe we should go to this doctor. It is literally the entire structure of the healthcare system itself. So health freedom is a right, and it's ours to claim immediately. So, again, from my perspective, I haven't had a general practitioner for 15 years, no interest in it, no interest in going to doctors, no interest in flu shots or any of the stuff that they give. And that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in my health. The opposite is true. I've spent a lot of time not only studying fasting, but a whole variety of other approaches. And I think that, there's an opportunity to create healthcare marketplaces that are outside of medical licensing, outside of insurance, and ways of bringing in alternate therapies, because there's almost, I mean, again, when you really dig into it, you realize that the system is not designed at all with a primary goal or even a secondary goal of improving our health. So of course we have the kind of structure that we have because it wasn't intended to have a positive result. So I've talked already about, my personal reflections, I guess, over the last couple of days. I have been meditating a lot more, which is interesting, and you get a lot of insights through that. And there's a heightened level of, you're present, you're in the moment the entire time you're on the fast. So you can't help but be conscious of what's going on. So you start really analyzing not only the world around you, but you start analyzing what you're doing yourself. So I found myself changing my workflow and everything else, because with everything that I'm doing, I'm like, oh, well, why am I doing it this way? Or why have I done it this way? So I've been making a lot of tweaks to my processes, tools that I use, thoughts, even thinking about, oh, why do I do it this way? Why don't I consider doing this, or why don't I explore this? And so that's a really interesting thing. But you're also more present when you're in different states, which includes, if you're in a meditative state, you're in a much more it's not as difficult. If you've never meditated before, this might not make any sense, but when you do just sit there and you're reflecting, you have a lot of thoughts that come up, and depending upon whatever's going on, your mind might be racing, but your mind isn't really racing when you're in a fasted state. You really are present in the moment. You're not thinking about the past. You're not sitting there sad about the past or having a lot of anxiety about the future. You're worried about the now, and in part it's because your body is in this heightened state of we're not eating any external food. And so you can use this to your advantage, and it really helps make meditation more powerful. But even dreams, I woke up this morning kind of in the middle of a REM cycle, but I found myself being able to maintain the REM cycle while actually being conscious of it. And this also plays into the ability to lucid dream, if that's something that you've ever been able to do. And so that's one of the insights that I've had, and I think I've talked about the rest just in terms of the importance of walking and being grounded and everything else. But I'm conveying all of these things because if you haven't fasted before, you might think, oh my God, it's day 11. It's got to be this just horror show, and that's really not the case at all. I'm not saying that it's not always pleasant, but you grow through the pain, and it's not like catastrophic pain. Like, I don't feel like I'm going to die. I don't feel like I'm starving. I mean, if I were eating 3 meals a day and my insulin was all screwed up, I would actually feel a greater sense of hunger when I woke up in the morning for breakfast than I do now on day 11. So the hunger is kind of a muted hunger that's going on kind of behind the surface. And so, again, I'm keeping a journal. I'm going to document all this stuff. I may turn it into a book because I do think that it's a powerful thing. And once you understand what's going on kind of day by day or at these critical milestones throughout the fast, might open your mind. And for a lot of people, again, with diseases like type 2 diabetes, you go through a long-term fast, it will reverse these things. Now, if you go through a long-term process, a prolonged fast, and your body resets, but then you come out of the fast and you repeat all of the same behaviors, then you're going to get back into those same conditions. So probably the most important thing about a fast is how you break it and what you do out of it. So I'm going to do a 30-day process, and I'm going to explain how I'm deconstructing my diet and all of the different things that I've already learned most of this, but every time I do one of these, there are new things that you can learn about. And it's not even just diet that you think about tweaking. I mean, for instance, I haven't used toothpaste with fluoride in it for I don't know how long. But, you start to examine, once you realize, oh, they were lying to me about food. Well, what's my toothpaste like? Do I need shaving cream? What's the deal? So shampoo, you actually start questioning everything. And so I'm going to go through a process of examining and showing some of the things that I've learned over the years, and then we'll continue to be learning during this fast. So again, these are the standard tips that I guess I should add to this grounding, but electrolytes and salt are key. Somebody actually texted me today, said, how can you sustain during this fast? And it would not be possible without electrolytes and salt. Again, my one bad experience with fasting was I had coffee and I didn't have salt, and I stood up and just passed out, and then woke up and I was on the floor. That's the only bad time out of over a couple hundred days of fasting. So salt is critical, and so are electrolytes. And if you manage that properly throughout the day, so I've got my desk here, I've got my electrolytes here, I've got my tea here. I literally have I have a container of electrolytes, and I have salt right here, and so I'm always staying on top of this. And so this fast is actually going better than fasts in the past. I used to be, even after like day 4 or 5, you might get into this issue where you actually have to be careful getting up. You might be lightheaded. So whereas there was the one time that I passed out, there are other situations where, well, I know if I'm not careful, if I get up too fast, I'm gonna pass out. I've had absolutely none of that. I've had no issues with that at all. Which isn't to say, check back in 5 to 10 days. It does get a little bit dicier, kind of. I know after day 20, but so far so good. Meditation helps, journaling helps, and again, I've now replaced black coffee with tea, which is not something I had to do in the past either. So this resetting of taste buds it'll blow your mind, actually, because depending upon how not conscious you've been about eating, if you find yourself like you're eating something like Doritos, or I used to drink Diet Coke or whatever, when you come out of a long fast with your taste buds reset, and then you taste those things, they will taste like you were just drinking chemicals in a lab. It's disgusting. So when you come out of it, if you're conscious about that, your body will tell you what foods you need. When you're breaking a fast, if you weren't thinking about it in advance, you could just go to the grocery store, go to the refrigerator, and your body will tell you. You might think you want one thing, your body will tell you what it actually needs, and you can carry that throughout long after the process. In fact, the longer you remain a conscious eater, the less health problems you'll have. Additionally, though, if you go back to the old ways, and I will probably do a segment or something on, there are scientists that work with these big food companies that spend time engineering tastes. So when you look at a food label and you see all these different chemicals and everything else and flavorings, there's a whole industry around manipulating our taste buds to addict us to specific foods. And because of that, what that means is those chemicals are actually very effective at doing those things. And so you can't ease those things back. Like sugar is an addictive thing. I've seen some report or something somewhere that suggested that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And so you actually don't need any excess sugar. And when you do, if you go off the wagon, then, it's kind of like heroin or cocaine or something like that. You're going to be addicted again. So there's some things where once you come off of this, you just don't want to touch those things ever again. And it's a very interesting learning process. And I'm going to try to figure out how to document that, in a book, but obviously not that many people read books. I'm going to try to figure out what, in a variety of different formats, how to convey some of this, because it's the post-fast where the real magic happens. And again, these are good resources. Dr. Eric Berg for intermittent fasting, which is really the starting point to getting into prolonged fasting. So I started out doing, fasting for 12 hours, and then 16 hours. And then 20 hours, and then 1 day, etc. And then once your body becomes fat adapted, which is the state that I'm currently in, 100%, then fasting is actually not that difficult at all. It can be more difficult if you eat a lot of carbs, if you eat sugar, then this entire process is more difficult, particularly in the first 3 days of the fast. But if you kind of stick with it and take these tips in mind and use the salt and electrolytes, all will be good. So with that, this was a shorter one. Like I said, as you can see, it does take a lot of effort to put together this content. And, I've been doing I've created a lot of content in the past that I haven't actually put out there yet. in various formats, and so I'm actively working on that, whether it's the music, turning those into videos, and a lot of other things. So I've been doing a lot of that behind the scenes in addition to creating this new content. So so the next podcast, we'll do the live Q&A roundtable next, but the next podcast will be on Tuesday. I also wanted to throw out, and I don't know how many, we don't seem to have too many people in the chat right now, but I'll do a poll. I was looking at the data on my various social media channels, and it almost seems like 6 o'clock is a better time to do this podcast based on traffic. So I wanted to get people's opinion on, whether I should shift this to 6 o'clock from 8 o'clock, because it looks like that might actually deliver more reach. So I haven't made a decision on that. I want to get some feedback first, but that's something that I'm considering. And then next week, I'm going to be focusing a lot of my content on Zano and switching over to talking about why privacy coins are absolutely critical, particularly in the context of CBDCs, which are accelerating, and stable coins, which are backdoor CBDCs. And so I want to talk about why in particular Zano is interesting. And it's really by the first on Tuesday's podcast, I'll talk about why tokenization as a general concept is important and what some of the use cases are for tokenization just at a high level. And then I'll move into more specific conversations about Zano and how it works and how you can get it and how you can use it and what some of the specific applications are. So stay tuned for that for next week. And now I'll open it up. I'm going to put a link in the notes here, so anybody who wants to pop in, and again, if no one pops in, that's fine as well. I have to admit, I didn't have a lot of time to market this today. I didn't even send it to my email list. I didn't get it circulated to a whole variety of places. I ended up a little bit under the gun, so we don't have as many people on as we might normally have on a Thursday, and I haven't even reached out to everybody that normally would join. So let me send out a couple of links now. I'll keep talking for a little bit. If you want to put any questions in the comments, happy to answer those while we give time for people to pop into the live Q&A. Again, usually I go for more than an hour, so I know some of the people that chime in. Here we go. On the spaces, you laid out the truth about CBDCs and the coming government control. Oh, there we go. And all they wanted to do is argue about block size Bitcoin. Yeah, I was on a Twitter space today with a great Twitter space that was put together by Joel and Dash, and it was a whole bunch of people that work on a lot of projects in DeFi, a lot of OGs, and the topic was maximalism. Are you a maximalist or are you a multi-chain person? And there were a lot of people kind of still going back to rehashing this. And this is a frustration that I have that I've been trying to figure out how to articulate, and I'll share this. This will be the topic of my talk at ETHDAM, in addition to talking about Roger, which is that there's a lot of infighting in crypto, and crypto often acts like it exists in a silo where as if there were no external pressure, and that we didn't have to compete with governments or traditional finance. In fact, most people are not aware, even directly in crypto. And so your comment on this is true. I've been to crypto conferences all over the place. People, I wrote my book on CBDCs. I've been doing all this stuff on CBDCs, and I thought maybe that the crypto community was more up to speed on this, and they're actually not. They're as kind of aware of what's going on as anyone else, which is frightening, because we should be in this alarm situation, like DEFCON 1, figuring out how do we work together to get multiple coins to work and solutions easy for everybody to use. For the average person, we already have digital money, but I can assure you, I've researched all of the CBDC projects that are going on right now. When they roll out CBDCs, they are going to be easy to use, like to the point where you're not even going to have a wallet that you have to download. They can put out CBDCs where they give you a, like, you know, what looks like a debit card, which is, by the way, how they do food stamps right now. Food stamps are issued through basically state issued debit cards, and it's programmable money and it uses the current system. But they're going to be able to do the same thing with CBDC, so that somebody who is the recipient of a CBDC can just use a touch by pay card or whatever that's tied. It is tied to a wallet, but they never even have to touch a wallet. I've even seen ideas that they might turn the post offices into locations where you can go to pay your bills. So they're going to have everything figured out. They're going to have it figured out so that you don't have to have a computer. They're going to have it figured out so it works for people with disabilities. This is what they're working on, and we're sitting around like focused on, well, you know, the application is going to be DeFi. I'm telling you, like this is such a gigantic misunderstanding of what is going on in the world. None of the workshops that I've gone to, none of the people that I've talked to about onboarding are going to be able to deal with or interact with DeFi. We don't even have the basic building blocks. And by the way, DeFi is going to, like, part of the problem with, I'm a fan of the concept of DeFi, but when you understand that not only are they going to roll out CBDCs that are programmable, they're going to also tie those into our stocks and bonds and all of our other assets, which are going to be programmed and centrally controlled as well. So if we're sitting here and the only use case that we have is a complicated system, a kind of a Rube Goldberg machine where everybody is like, all they're doing is trading other cryptocurrencies and generating yield, that is not going to compete with what's being built. So I'm going to try to do a better job of laying out visually to try to like examples of, okay, here's what they're building. Because I've talked technically about the kinds of programs that are being built, but I want to put it in terms of with visuals of, all right, here's exactly what they're building, and then this is what they're building. Because one of the things that came up on the spaces today was some people that said, well, we already lost on payments. Well, you know, we can't lose on payments. It is devastating that Bitcoin was hijacked and that we are now playing defense instead of being in an offensive position, which is where we were 2010, right? 2010, there were no CBDCs. No one was developing any of these things. We didn't even have Venmo or Zelle or Google Pay or Apple Pay. So we had a huge lead. It was squandered. It was squandered intentionally through a hijacking process. And now people are splintered off into these projects that are niche projects that don't address the underlying threat of CBDC tyranny. So that's my rant on that.
You want to tussle. You want to tussle with me. You want to tussle.
Hey, George.
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me? I should have had my microphone on mute.
I can. How are you?
Good. So just to dig into what you were saying a moment ago about how they'll make it simple for people, they'll issue a debit card that's tied into a blockchain. It appears that they're not going to do, quote unquote, a central bank digital currency, but they'll backdoor it with having each of the major banks issue their own stable coin. And this is where I'm asking for you to correct me where I'm wrong. So right now, if a government entity wanted to get access to your credit cards, you know, what expenditures have you made recently, then they'd have to get a warrant, which isn't difficult for them to do. And then they would be able to access this. But if it's all on these blockchains, which are immutable ledgers, so essentially just a transparent, no privacy database, then in the click wrap that you click to continue when a major bank says, "Oh, life is easy now. Here's our debit coin backed by our stable coin." Does that mean that it just, privacy's gone?
Privacy's already gone. So first of all, I want to correct you on that, the needing to get a warrant. So our money is already digital. The central bank works on an Oracle database. Other banks have either SQL databases, MySQL databases, or Oracle databases. It's already programmable. There are already, and I've outlined this in an article, 13 different ways in which the federal government is tracking our financial transactions. AI is already working, or the IRS is already working using AI with banks to monitor transactions. There's already NSA bulk data collection. You already have suspicious activity reports and reports that automatically are triggered to the Treasury. So anytime you do a transaction of more than $10,000, that gets flagged and immediately sent to the Treasury. Just 3 weeks ago, the Treasury decided, well, we don't like what's going on. We think there's some illegal aliens or something in Texas or California. So they put out a thing and told all of the banks that for 30 zip codes in these 2 states, you have to report all transactions of greater than $200. So the point is they already have the ability to do this now. They're already actively doing this now. They're already censoring people. But the misconception in all of this, and this is a great kind of scheme that they have going on, the central bank is useless. It is an unnecessary third party that prints money out of thin air backed by IOUs. And then they rug pull people and rug pull the money supply by manipulating interest rates, and then they steal people's actual physical assets, but when they default on money that was just printed out of thin air. So I'm not defending the central bank, but understand that the entity that has put in place all of the tracking is Congress. So all of the surveillance that's going on right now, this wasn't the Federal Reserve Act. This isn't Federal Reserve policy. This wasn't driven by the Federal Reserve. Everything from the Bank Secrecy Act to the Patriot Act to a long list of bills, and it's on my list to go through and document the history of this for everybody. But when I see Ted Cruz say, well, we've got to stop the central banks from, invading the for surveilling people's transactions, it's like, you reauthorize the Patriot Act. You were responsible for it. The Federal Reserve has not had they don't have an incentive to go out of their way to implement all of these things. In addition, let's not forget that, at least we think, the central bank is owned by the largest commercial banks. So this idea of, oh, well, the central bank is the problem. Okay, well, if you give JP Morgan the authority to issue a debit card, they're probably the largest owner of the central bank. You've actually solved no problem by doing that. And it's not difficult in this day and age with AI and surveillance to monitor, transactions from 5 banks or 50 banks versus one central bank. This doesn't actually give you any material benefit. In fact, the Federal Reserve might actually serve in a way as somewhat of a buffer, because, from a surveillance perspective, what might actually be worse than a central bank digital currency is if you got rid of the central bank and the government issued a digital currency directly, because then you would have no intermediary between the government and surveillance and censoring your money at all, which, by the way, I'm not advocating for the central bank. I'm advocating for the complete separation of money and state. But the commercial banks are also complicit in all of this surveillance as well. When you hear about all of these people who were canceled, which include Barron Trump, Melania Trump, Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Dr. Joseph Mercola, countless other people that were debanked, not just people in crypto, people outside of crypto. Well, when you look at where those people banked, they were banking at Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase. Kanye West was not canceled because of the Federal Reserve. He was not canceled because of Congress. He was canceled because of a policy by JP Morgan, as was Dr. Joseph Mercola, and the others were canceled because of the policy for their commercial bank. So when we sit here and we talk about our concern about where the tyranny is going to come from, we have to understand that the tyranny actually, historically today, comes from the commercial banks and Congress. The Federal Reserve is just a completely useless, corrupt, unnecessary third party. Now, tokenization does make it easier to program money, because it's kind of like right now. So if you think about these as running on, our banks are, Web 1.0, right? So they're running on centralized databases that can be, hacked, where the transactions can be reversed, where the data can be deleted, and so forth. Tokenization is actually a good thing to the extent that, from a security perspective, it's the evolution of a database. However, the devil's in the details. If it's a centrally issued token that's programmable and controlled by centralized parties, then tokenization is a ratchet up in tyranny. If it's a privacy token that you have in your self-custody and that you're able to use peer-to-peer, then that's actually an improvement. And to me, this is where the battleground is right now, which of course, everything that I just said is very tough to explain to the general public who doesn't even understand that we have a central bank or have any basis of an understanding of what fiat currency is or where it came from.
Thanks for clarifying that for me. I just wanted to congratulate you on undertaking another major fast like this. You know, I've known you for years, and I've seen you do 3 days, 5 days, 7 days plus. And I can tell you firsthand, having to keep up with you with some of the things I help you on, that, you know, how many days are you into this fast again?
11.
11. And, you know, you're a high output person, but your productivity has definitely increased in the past few days. And now I'm playing catch up on a lot of the things that I help you with.
Well, that's right. Well, and thank you for everything. Just so you know, George is completely responsible for the Daylight website. Does all of the work on that, and I have been producing massive amounts of content. I mean, just videos, video clips, songs, everything else. And you know, just the other night, as I mentioned, I can't really fall asleep before 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so I just stayed up and powered through and created 64 memes. So if you look at the memes on the website, I mean, I powered through those in one day. Now, part of that is, you know, part of a day. I mean, part of that is, you know, me having focused attention. The other part of it is AI. And, but even during this process, like, there's been such a leapfrog. Like, I'm using different AIs, I'm using these things differently. And so it's a power up. I said when I started this on day one that expect for me to produce a year's worth of content during this fast. And I think that will, it will be beyond that. I mean, I think by the time this is done, you know, there'll probably be, you know, 200 memes, you know, 50 hours of video content, a book, you know, plus whatever else. So, you know, it's good because I haven't had time to produce as much content because I've been traveling or sick for basically the last 3 months before doing the fast. But also I have no inflammation or brain fog at all. That is one of the you know, amazing things. So if you have brain fog, because most people have brain fog, I mean, for a whole variety of reasons. Maybe you had COVID. If you have too many carbs, your diet is screwed up. Insulin, like their whole, you know, brain fog is actually a pretty common thing. Brain fog goes away, and surprisingly, you know, I went through the top 10 lies of nutrition in 2 of the podcasts, but one thing that I remember is another one of the big bullshit lies that they pushed was that you have to have sugar to fuel your brain. I remember growing up as a kid being told that that was something that was absolutely necessary. It's completely untrue. Your body can create glucose. You don't need to consume the thing if your body can create the thing. So we've actually completely brainwashed people, and that's just another one of the nutrition public health memes that was pushed that is 100% false. So I have a complete lack of brain fog right now, even though my speech is not as good as my thinking is right now. My thinking is absolutely clear, and my body is running 100% on ketones, which is the breakdown of fat tissue in the liver. So that's something that, you know, again, I'm going to put together a whole slate of memes just to break these myths, because most people still, even today, and what's taught in school, people still think you need 3 meals a day. People still think breakfast is the most important meal of the day. People think that you need to have carbs or sugar in the morning. Like, it's all wrong. Like, it's all 100% wrong. It's provably wrong. And the genesis of it was malicious. And so I hope that comes out, at least I hope some people get that takeaway from this process.
Yeah, there's a book that I started listening to. I do Audible, Blind Spots, When Medicine Gets It Wrong and What It Means for Our Health. It's by a guy, Marty Macari, MD. And it speaks to, you know, who was behind pushing that you need sugar and, you know, carbs and sugar as opposed to fats and triglycerides. And then also, so he breaks down information that was pumped out to the populace over the years. And what you find in the book, and this is all backed. Obviously, the guy's not been sued for putting out facts. It's an interesting book, and it speaks into detail about what groups were behind a lot of these falsehoods. And you find that Big Sugar is going to push sugar. The whole thing where you got to stop eating eggs, that was total bullshit because of cholesterol.
I went through that. Actually, that was a big part of the episodes 9 and 10. It was actually a guy named Ansel Keys who was the one he worked with the American Heart Association, and he put out some cherry-picked manipulated data to show that red meat and eggs and high fat led to heart attacks. And it turns out he was also being paid by the sugar lobby. And that goes back to the 70s or so. So that whole myth was started there, and it was pushed by Big Sugar, but interestingly backed up by the American Heart Association. And in these earlier podcasts, one of the things that I did was I not only took what was the lie, but I wanted to go to that next step, which was to say, who is responsible? Were they held accountable? Or how much money did they make off of it? And Ansel Keys ended up being on the front cover of Time magazine. Nobody ever retracted anything. Nobody was ever held responsible. These people actually continue to make money on this today, which is why it's really important that people understand that it's malice and not just simply we learned more. Because in all examples, even drinking 8-ounce glasses of water a day being good for you, that is not necessarily good for you. In fact, that can cause kidney problems. That was pushed by Nestle and all of the big water companies. Sugar is just empty calories. Sugar is actually worse than empty calories. Sugar fuels cancer and destroys your insulin response and everything else. And here's the funny thing. The next diet that's coming out, the global food pyramid, it's called the Lancet Whole Earth Diet. It actually recommends that you can have a certain amount of added sugar to your diet every day. It's actually a worse food pyramid than the food pyramid from 1992. So I'm trying to figure out the right way to put those top 10 into video clips or stories and a combination of memes and everything else, because this is the kind of stuff, to me, it's really important now. It's not that you have to make a clean break. You have to basically say, hey, your doctor's killing you, not get into a debate over, well, what did this study say, or what did your doctor say? Your doctor's been trying to kill you. You actually need to cut yourself off from that process, and you need to take responsibility for your own health directly. It's absolutely critical at this point.
So now that you've got this content up on the website, what can people do to help to spread the message about the fast and just get more awareness? In one of the earlier podcasts that you had mentioned that your goal is to build momentum. I think, correct me where I'm wrong, I think Gandhi had gotten to a 21-day fast. And so maybe and other famous people have gotten to various number of days. And so when you hit those milestones, and maybe, just maybe, we start to get more attention to what you're doing and what the reason behind it is.
Yeah, by the way, I just added blind spots to Audible because you mentioned it, and then a gentleman that was on the podcast 2 days ago also mentioned it. So that's enough data points for me. So I'm going to start listening to that tonight or tomorrow. Because I've heard good things about that book. As far as the momentum, so I haven't even reached out to. So I think, because you put the stuff up on the website. I've probably am behind on 20. I've probably done 50 different, not 50 different podcasts, but 50 different podcasts, and some of them I've done multiple times. And so I suspect most of them, and when I reach out to them with this, would be willing to have me on again to talk about this. And so, not that I want to do, I can't do all of them. There's a certain, I've got to be strategic just with my energy. So I've already got a podcast coming up, I think in a week or two, with Alex Newman. I'm going to do weaponized news, and then I'm going to start reaching out to other people probably tomorrow to start scheduling those to build momentum. I think the next big kind of interim milestone is day 14. But then, yeah, by day 21, I want to get onto larger platforms. So I've been on the Alex Jones show before. I've been on with Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Those are those kinds of platforms would be a great next step for that. But we have to keep in mind who we're trying to influence, which is the AG and Trump. So that we have to think about, well, who's in their orbit. So Tucker Carlson and people around that. That's what I'm thinking about for day 40. So I'm thinking we build momentum. I'll start doing podcasts next week, increasing them by day 14, which actually will be early next week. Then do some even larger ones on day 21, and then use that combined momentum to try to push to really huge podcasts. And so one thing that can be done is, and I've got you'll see I post clips from these podcasts, and they're all scheduled to go out, but there are literally so many of them. I have a backlog. I'm not even sure how to do it at this point because there's an oversaturation. If I put, I see in the comments, Timcast, the Culture War. I mean, that's a possibility, but there's what helps is to tag people, because just so that everybody knows, I never have requested to be on a podcast before. All of the podcasts that I've ever been on are because either somebody reached out to me or because you guys actually tagged someone. That's actually how I got on with Health Ranger, was somebody listening to this podcast reached out and suggested that I go on the show. So this has all been, so everything that's happened, which culminated, I think the largest viewership I've had was 8 million on the Alex Jones podcast, which was, by the way, being hosted by Mike Adams, but there was a segment where it was Roger talking for 15, 20 minutes or half an hour, and then I talked for a half an hour. That reached 8 million views. So that was the peak. But I mean, at this point, I've done enough of these that, I think I can handle that. And so if you're thinking about this, I see Patrick Bet David was also recommended. So the best way to do this is, if you guys can just start tagging people on either this podcast or any of the other podcasts or any of the content of the clips that you think is particularly engaging, and or point them to the site. So the idea behind the site, and you know what, I didn't put it on there, but I also designed the site for this because I am planning on actually putting together media pitches, which for later in the process. But I wanted this website to be something that, okay, if a booking agent or something came to this, they could go to the site and they could see, okay, what's this all about? What's the case about? Here are the high level videos. Freedom is not a crime. It sets the stage for what that is, and then links to all of the other episodes along with a pitch that I would write up. So that's what I'm planning on doing to push kind of the interview process and to push my network. But it's better, and so far it's worked with when people just tag these people or email or reach out if you know some of these people. And in some cases you don't even have to know them. I mean, it's been amazing how impactful it is when somebody that's hosting a podcast has 4 or 5 different people that are not all like friends or connected reach out and make the same kind of general pitch. Then that actually is something that puts it front and center on the radar. And I think that he says we are change. Yeah, I was on with Luke, and I think he would be interested in this because he's interested in the weight loss angle as well. The only problem with that, so some of the issues with this is you have to go actually be in studio. So some of this is like, okay, I mean, I've got to factor in, do I want to fly to Miami for a podcast? The ROI on that from a cost perspective is, I guess I could put together some crowdfunding for this. That's another way to see if there's actually demand for it. But there are a couple of other shows that might be interesting. The Matt Kim show. Obviously Joe Rogan would be a good one, and you never know who will be interested in something like this. I mean, again, a 40-day fast is actually a pretty big deal, as is a 21-day fast, and we want to make sure that we hit into Trump's area, and I know Trump is clearly it's on the radar of people. Tucker and Joe Rogan are definitely on his radar. Jimmy Dore is another one that might be a fit for this as we level up. Now, of course, I have to also keep in mind, like, okay, if I'm doing like a 2-hour podcast on day 40, what's that going to be like? Like, because I do know it gets, it does get a little bit more difficult. I was definitely spending more time resting when I did the prolonged stuff before, but I mean, I'm already scheduled to give a keynote speech in Amsterdam on day 40. So, I'm up for the challenge.
And then I know that you have plans for Pork Fest, which is a big festival in New Hampshire for the Free State Project. Are there any updates on that? Because that's going to be a privacy coin focused event for you there, right?
Yeah, I'll do a whole podcast or maybe even 2 on that. I mean, we're scheduling speakers because we have the whole tent. We have the prime tent that's like right between the main pavilion and the bonfire. So if anybody's ever been there, like, this is, you can't get a better location than this. And so we literally have our own tent. We can accommodate it. And I basically just requested the brownstone configuration. So we actually have the same like stage and setup for couches and everything else, which was actually a really cool vibe. I think that I think that was probably the best vibe. It's always an oasis to kind of go to the brownstone tent. So we have that same configuration. People from Xano is sponsoring this. We're gonna have Confidential Layer there. We're gonna have it's co-hosted with Mineratopia, so we're gonna have a lot of people there, and so I think there's an opportunity not only to have talks, and I'm open if you want to speak. I've got a whole long list of people who have already told me that they're interested. I just need to like carve out a day and like power through it. But I think we're gonna have just absolutely top speakers on privacy related topics, not even just crypto related, but I think we've got somebody that tries to help people with cell phones and to kind of move away from work on solutions there, even maybe hopefully Sterling Lujan talking about network states. So we're going to be putting all that together, and I'll put together a screenshot. But then I think for me, a lot of it's going to be literally just going up and down Agora Alley, buying stuff and trying to get the people that are the vendors to take Xano, to take these alternative currencies, which is, if you think about it, that's really huge. When you think about all the work that's done, if you're trying to introduce these privacy coins to people, okay, well, whatever, I can do a podcast and I can talk about it, but what it actually takes for somebody to download a wallet and to receive it and to actually engage in a peer-to-peer transaction, the amount of work that is required to do that is massive, because a lot of people just need to be walked through it, and then they need to have a use case, then they need to have a vendor that's willing to accept it. So we're going to have like 2,000 to 3,000 people and a whole long area of people that are selling things for alternative currencies. And so this is going to be, to me, that I think pounding the pavement and just buying things from people and getting them to use this. But so many people were introduced to Bitcoin by Roger and Eric Voorhees and people like that in 2012, that it really kicked off the whole Bitcoin craze. And back then the enthusiasm was around defeating central banks and actually using money outside of the system. That was the entire purpose. There wasn't a single person in 2012 sitting around the campfire saying, oh yeah, wait, I'm going to hold on to this and wait until it's hobbled and then hope and pray that I can convince the government to use civil asset forfeiture and taxpayer money to buy my back. Not a single person was talking about that. But unfortunately now, 13 years have passed, And now we have the threat of CBDCs. We have to make this successful. Whereas before, it would have been an improvement to have. It would have been an upgrade to the current system. But now, if we are not successful at onboarding people to private peer-to-peer cash, we're all going to get stuck with CBDC. So there should be a profound sense of urgency, which I will say I've tried to do everything that I can. Running for president, writing a book, going all over the country. I've been trying to, raise the alarm bells on this, but it hasn't sunk in yet. And as I learned on this, space today, it hasn't sunk in with OGs in crypto. That's the more alarming part, because as I talk about, and George, you and I've talked about for a long time, markets always develop with, innovators first, and then, early adopters. I mean, there's a very specific, adoption cycle for this. And the people that should be the innovators have been fractured into 20,000 different pieces and are now off. One group's like, well, we've given up on payments, so we're working on DeFi. Another group is over here saying, well, the best possible use case. I mean, today there are people trying to defend Tether. I don't know how you defend Tether as the pinnacle of cryptocurrency. The idea was to have something that you could use as payments separate from third parties, and now you're talking about something that is tokenized fiat. So you basically have you've added a layer on top of fiat, and then you've added financial risk and programmability and centralized control. It's an idiotic. It's an own goal. I can't think of a worse outcome for where crypto adoption has come from. So people that are celebrating the adoption of stablecoins have not thought through the implications of it. The last article that I wrote for Brownstone was about this. It was about, and I encourage people to read it because I give the whole background, the analysis on the bills, the background on Tether, on USDC, who the people are that fund it, the fact that the stablecoins can already be tracked and censored by the government, that they're already working with law enforcement, that it does nothing for privacy. It's just added risk. So the fact that people are using it is not exciting. It's that the people that are using it have no idea what they're using. They're using what they think is convenient, but they're not realizing that it could rug out of them at any time. For instance, if Tether doesn't actually have the reserves, which the only thing that we have supporting Tether reserves is our Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, whose company invested $600 million in Tether and who manages the treasuries, saying that, trust me, bro, they have the reserves. There's no audit. USDC has passed certain audits, but to give you an example of how big the risk is, they had $3.2 billion at Silicon Valley Bank before it collapsed. So had the VCs not cried and whined and got the Federal Reserve to bail that bank out, USDC would have been bankrupt. So that's how unstable stablecoins are through these third parties in rolling them out. If they're rolled out by JP Morgan Chase, then it's, again, it's a backdoor CBDC. I think the whole purpose of the stable genius bills is to put up regulatory barriers that make it so that the outcome is that Tether and USDC are acquired by large financial institutions. And if I had to make my best guess, I would say that Tether will be acquired by JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs will buy USDC. And that is not a win in any metric.
Yeah, one point I'd like to make is, when people talk about OGs, I think the vast majority of people that have come to take crypto a little bit more serious over the past, 5-7 years, their OGs are guys like Michael Saylor, where I would not consider Saylor or all these people that were recently, speaking on a crypto summit with the U.S. government. I wouldn't consider any of those people OGs. A lot of the OGs that I know, and that I only know them from 2013, 2014, the vast majority of those have just got quiet on crypto and have moved into privacy coins because they realize that the fix is in. And then the true OGs from 2009, 10, 11. I mean, we haven't heard from any of those people, and everybody's looking to see, if they even touch some of those wallets from back then.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know where some of that stuff is, but I mean, obviously, we know where Roger is, and he was 2010. But the alarming class is the people that were there in 2010, 2012 that are pushing the Bitcoin maxi narrative. Those are the worst people because they know better and they have defied their own ideology, and now they're trying to rationalize it. And
Well, because they were sold when Bitcoin got hijacked. We always were asking, where the heck did this Bitcoin $100,000 number come from? And then only with Roger and his co-author putting out the book that really defined where that concept came from, then it hit it, and now it's just going down. So all of a sudden, you have MicroStrategy putting out information recently in their SEC filings that they may have to dump. So the real question is when is the dump coming, and how many people, boomers, who finally bought in for 401ks are really going to take the fall on that?
well, I mean, it has dumped, right? The high was 109,000, and it is currently at 79,000. So that's generally considered to be a dump for as far as currencies go, right? Like the dollar has lost 26% of its purchasing power since 2020. Well, the Bitcoin has lost, whatever, 30-40% of its value in the last year, in the last 6 months. So we're not looking at it in this point. If people want to look at it as a store of value, then you actually need to be valued and considered under the basis of the volatility of store of value, not as volatility for a stock. So arguably it's already crashed. So basically the point right now is, unless these politicians can convince taxpayers, can convince governments to buy this, then it will not continue to go up. So basically the lifeline for this Ponzi is government, is taxpayers. That is the exit. And I think that that's an exit pump. And people like Michael Saylor and other people that are pushing for this behind the scenes, that is their exit pump. And they're going to then exit, and they're going to buy other assets. And, and it's like every ad. So this is just going to get dumped on boomers or whoever's buying things through these other financial instruments. But it very well could go way up if, certainly if they're forcing taxpayers to buy it, then it's going to go up in price, right? That's going to happen. But that doesn't change. Like at some point that runs out. And because they destroyed the underlying utility of it by keeping the block small, then we're reaching a point with the next halving where they're going to have to increase the number of coins. They're going to have to violate the fundamental thing that people are banking on, that is what makes it unique, which is that it's the hardest asset known to man because of this 21 million supply cap. But that 21 million supply cap will not work, and it will not provide for the security of the blockchain. And so I don't know how long it's going to take, but from my perspective, what I'm trying to urge people to think about is that it's slow, expensive digital surveillance gold, and it can all be tracked. So in many respects, it's worse than gold in that regard. I mean, it's not going to be hard how hard would it be for the government to confiscate BlackRock's ETF? These things are all written in the risk factors. And then people will say to me, it's like, well, they can't stop a Bitcoin transaction. Okay, they can't. But some of the most cypherpunk people that you'll ever know, people like Ross Ulbricht, people like Ian Freeman, people who are intelligent, who understand how it works, and who were involved in the beginning. Ian had $5 million worth of Bitcoin confiscated from him, and Ross Ulbricht had, whatever. He's probably the largest, contributor to the Bitcoin strategic reserve. Well, now they could have said, well, yeah, you can't have my keys. But what they get faced with is, all right, well, here's the deal. You can either spend the rest of your life in prison, or you can give us your keys. Well, so what kind of proposition? So how many people are you really holding on to the fact that you're going to die in a cage, but at least you got to hold on to your keys? That's basically what the value proposition is at this point to the censorship resistance of Bitcoin. The fact that it's trackable, and the fact that it is slow and doesn't do many transactions makes it even easier to track, right? If people were doing millions of transactions a second on Bitcoin, it would make it actually harder to track. But the last time I looked at this, the blocks aren't even full. Actually, Bitcoin transactions dropped to 11 cents because people aren't using it. So it's like, it's not hard to track what's going on with Bitcoin. But again, I have to stress, because when I was on the space today, people need to get out, and people need to get out in the world and talk to the public. And because if you're sitting there thinking the future is DeFi, and the reality is that the majority of the world, and these are even people that are ahead of the curve, people that were, onboarded and started thinking differently because of COVID, and they've heard of Sam Bankman-Fried, they've never heard of Satoshi, they've never heard of the fact that people ever used Bitcoin as a currency. They didn't even know that was a concept. They've only heard of it as a speculative investment. And by the way, most of the conferences and people that I've talked to have a pretty negative view of it. So there's such a, from a marketing perspective, and a lack of understanding of what's out there. We are so siloed that everybody's just like, yeah, my new thing is going to beat your new thing. And in the meanwhile, banks and central banks and governments are building platforms to tokenize and digitize all of our assets, and basically, follow through on one world government with a social credit system. That's how big the disconnect is. And I don't know how to, go in and electrify people enough about this. I mean, somebody on there today was like, well, I don't think CBDCs are a bad thing because, people won't accept CBDCs. I'm like, are you kidding me? People will slow fail into anything. People don't have any knowledge of this. The general public doesn't have general knowledge. People aren't saying, oh, well, no, this is just a tokenized version of fiat. Most people don't know there's anything wrong with fiat. So,
yeah, and to dig a little deeper into something you touched on before, when the Bitcoin white paper was written, what the initial plans were with block rewards. So most of the people listening probably understand this, but essentially, every time a block is minted, you have a lot of electric being spent with these mining operations, and their reward is that they're given a number of Bitcoin, and every so often it halves. And the reason why the halving was designed is because theoretically, by this point in Bitcoin's evolution, the number of transactions, the block size should have increased to handle more transactions. So in many videos, you've talked about how many transactions per second Visa and MasterCard can do. And initially, Bitcoin was designed to be the people's money, separated from any one government. And you could do micropayments on it, theoretically. Back in about 2014, I had a cheesesteak shop. And although I wanted to take Bitcoin payment, I couldn't make my customers wait in line for an extra 30 minutes for the slow transaction to go through, because back then the blocks were, there were a lot of transactions, and then they weren't going to pay, $10 or more for the transaction when the sandwich only cost $15. And so we had a Bitcoin ATM in the location, and some people would go there and they'd pull cash out and then pay us in cash. Totally ridiculous when, it was a whole liberty focused cheesesteak shop, right? And so where I'm going with this is, what you had just said is that the transactions fees are down to 11 cents. So if you're a miner, then at some point, if number go down, then the amount of energy that you're pouring into possibly winning the block reward, which is literally a lottery ticket, you're not making it on the transactions. Because theoretically, if you were a miner and Bitcoin had evolved the way it was supposed to and hadn't been hijacked, then every miner that was adding transactions to the block would be paying for their mining operation just on the transaction fees alone, and the block reward would be bonus money.
Yeah, that was the entire purpose. The entire purpose of the block reward was to be a subsidy initially to actually secure the network until such time as that the transaction fees were entirely what sustained the network and entirely why miners were engaging in mining. So what you have right now is a situation where people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on mining equipment, essentially to buy a lottery ticket, hoping that either they'll mine it individually or that they're putting their hash power into a mining pool to get their percentage of a block reward. And by the way, that's literally how they're looking at it. I was at this Bitcoin conference in Dallas in 2013, and I was talking to some of these people because they had a whole big mining thing because it was in Texas, and it's like what was mind-boggling to me is you have people that invested hundreds of millions of dollars into mining equipment and don't even understand what the intention of it was. It's almost like they were buying $100 million worth of picks and shovels, thinking that they were going to be able to dig out gold. The disconnect about the original intent, but also the economics and the understanding, like you said, if the block reward halves and there are no blocks to mine, then unless governments are buying this thing, unless it's a Ponzi and the price keeps on going up, then it will collapse, and then you will immediately see mining operations go out of business, because the mining operations, oftentimes they immediately sell the Bitcoin, right? They solve the reward.
Yeah.
And now, by the way, increasingly miners are doing KYC. So a miner will win a block, and then they'll actually KYC their Bitcoin, and then they'll dump it on the market because they have to be able to pay for their electricity and their rent. So this is not sustainable. But
and so to your point earlier, what I think a lot of people don't realize too is that currently it's BTC, so it's already been forked. There was the initial Bitcoin, then there was the fork wars that happened, and so it became BTC when the developers that were in control put out the new code that made it slow and number go up. And when we start getting towards the end of these mining rewards, all these miners that are heavily invested in those block rewards, when BTC devs decide, hey, we've got to go past the 21 million cap, all those miners are going to join in on that because they're financially, that's the way they keep paying for their overhead. So it's not like the miners are going to push back on that. When BTC gets to the point where the block reward is so low that miners will drop out, and if you don't have miners, then you don't have a blockchain. It's just a stagnant dead coin. And then if you don't have any miners, and it doesn't sound like the government's they're going to start spinning up data locations with GPUs. Are they going to have any ASIC miners in those to keep a government-backed cryptocurrency reserve? I mean, who knows? They better start building some nuclear power plants if they want to power those things, though.
No, there's no reason to do that. They can just steal it. Civil asset forfeiture. Why mine when you can just steal? Literally, 200,000. China also has almost 200,000 Bitcoin. I actually put out a table a while ago of all of the countries and their top holdings, and the majority of these countries have just simply stolen the Bitcoin, which it's not hard to steal Bitcoin when you have chain analysis that can track people's transactions. So, I look at it this way. It's like the libertarians pushing for this. Libertarians, I don't know, it's disgusting to me. Ian Freeman, who introduced people either directly or indirectly. Ian Freeman introduced Roger to Bitcoin. He onboarded a whole bunch of these people. He has 5 million, which is now maybe worth $10 million worth of Bitcoin in that strategic reserve. And these people are celebrating this and pushing for this. And now they want to continue these policies. What's it going to be? You get pulled over for a speeding ticket and the officer says, oh, let me see your phone. And, if you've got Bitcoin on your wallet, they're going to steal it. Because, by the way, that sounds ridiculous. Study how civil asset forfeiture works. That isn't ridiculous.
Oh yeah. God forbid you're a guy that is wheeling and dealing in used vehicles or maybe even construction equipment, and you try to get on a plane with $40,000. Say goodbye to that money. You're not going to go make that transaction. Once you land where you're going, you're not going to have the funds.
Yep. So anyway, it's disgusting that it's happened. part of me doesn't want to spend any more time with Bitcoin maxis. They won't actually engage anyway. They've all blocked me. They've all blocked everyone. They've all blocked Roger. Roger and a friend of his offered $500,000 to Adam Back, one of the lead developers and the CEO of Blockstream, to have a debate about hijacking Bitcoin, where the proceeds went to charity, and Adam Back refused to do a debate for $500,000. They've blocked everybody. It's been about propaganda and censorship. The propaganda and censorship never stopped. It was rampant during the fork wars. And again, most people don't even know about the fork wars. But if you read about the fork wars, or you read Hijacking Bitcoin, you'd learn that that this propaganda and censorship happened. Well, what kind of propaganda and censorship is 3 weeks after he publishes a book arresting a guy, throwing him in the same prison that his friend John McAfee died in, and then having him sit there for 346 days awaiting extradition for 109 years in prison? How's that for not wanting the word to get out? So it's been almost impossible for the word to get out. I mean, I've been one of the only people talking about hijacking Bitcoin, so almost no one knows about it. And the people that, when I do talk to people that are outside of crypto and they hear about it, I'll give my normal talk or a workshop, and more people are interested in, wait a minute, Michael Saylor is a bad guy? Wait, this happened? There's more interest in kind of understanding this hijacking Bitcoin story, but there's no possible way to convince Bitcoin maxis, because they have undermined their core ideology, and they will never admit that to themselves. And so they're not open for debate. That debate won't be won. The debate is for the other 99.999% of the planet that's never heard of any of this, and might be a little bit startled to find that everything from Overstock.com to Microsoft to Subway sandwiches were actually taking Bitcoin as a currency in 2017, and that was its intended use. That's a mind boggler for most people.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I wasn't going to jump on, but I saw George on here, and I haven't spoken to him in a few years. Hey, George.
What's going on, Dan?
You'll remember me in just a moment. Speaking of problems we have, and I was thinking about this, that this would be one of the DeFi problems DeFi could actually solve. George used to be involved with ironclad homes, steelclad homes. What is it?
Yeah. So basically homes that look like any other home on the block that are built out of shipping containers. We built a prototype in South Florida because that particular structure, when it's the concrete's poured, it becomes what's called a monolithic pour, if anybody knows anything about construction. And essentially the home could withstand 297-mile-an-hour winds, which you can imagine is pretty appealing in South Florida. But just like any type of niche construction, it has its limitations. For example, you're not going 2 stories in that house.
Yeah, but here's our problem. And this is Ed from North Florida. It's been a few years since we used to talk on the phone quite a bit. George, you were doing the Raven coin, thinking about selling slots for the houses coming up, and I do insurance. And we can't get anybody to insure those damn homes. The one insurance company that it was a Blue Marlin that did insure that home, they are not a reputable company in any way, shape, or form. And nobody in the traditional market wants to touch it. And it's a shame, because that home is so much cheaper to fix after any kind of disaster, whether it be a fire, a flood, or a storm, than any other home on the market. And there's tons. Florida's not, there's lots of 2-story homes, but there's a ton of single-story homes throughout Florida, and especially up north Florida. So that's not a limitation that I see. I see one of them. I couldn't get the damn thing insured.
There's stall points for every kind of new product, and at the end of the day, there needs to be, and I get it, where insurance companies are risk adverse, but there's plenty other things to be focused on in my life right now. For example, the privacy, the getting of a bunch of our friends who have been suffered from lawfare, trying to get it more aware. We were fortunate enough, Aaron and I were in DC pre-election trying to get Trump and RFK, because, they were, the primaries hadn't finished, and trying to get those guys to sign the anti-central bank digital currency pledge. Neither one would, but at least we got some information in their ears, and that's why we're at least as far along as we are now.
Yeah, and I remember, Aaron, you got to speak to Vivek a bit on that, and I think he did get to speak to Trump on that.
He did. And Vivek read my book, and we actually had multiple conversations about it. I mean, he said he read my book, and then I was kind of like, whatever. And then I actually ran into him again, and we actually had a conversation about it, and it was clear that he did read the book, which was pretty fascinating. But again, to what effect? Because in a way, it's been a negative, because now people are complacent, and they shouldn't be, because stable coins are actually worse than CBDCs from the simple fact that they can be implemented. They already are implemented. In other words, if Tether all of a sudden was acquired by JP Morgan Chase, then all of a sudden we do have, people are using Tether. I mean, there is no doubt that they're using Tether, and a lot of people tell me about that. And it's very clear based on their market cap. And so if under these new regulations, it becomes owned by JP Morgan, and now we have even more KYC and more tracking, then essentially, it would take a while to introduce a CBDC. Now all of a sudden we have $160 billion programmable digital currency owned by a large bank that's already deployed. So we're in worse shape, and it's hard to. This article that I wrote for Brownstone was actually it was the article of the week or whatever for Brownstone, and usually Zero Hedge picks up my stuff, and they wouldn't pick that up. People don't want to talk about something that is critical of Trump's policies. People are afraid of discussing these things. You can't be critical of Elon Musk. I mean, you can't call out technocracy. Because it's frustrating, because it's actually much harder than it was before the election to educate people on this.
You mean the guy that's putting a chip in your head that'll connect to his global internet satellite?
That's the chap.
Yeah, that guy. Has Bruce Fenton said anything about Roger Ver?
No, he hasn't publicly. I'm going to be on that panel with him, and I think he's representing the Bitcoin maxi side, so it's going to be interesting. But
he's not a maxi, that's for sure.
Yeah, but if you look at his public persona, if you look, I think he's giving a talk on the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. I mean, in one sense, he's not a maxi because he created Ravencoin. On the other hand, he talks 99% of the time about Bitcoin. Now, he's also been critical of it recently, but at the same time, if you look at the talk that he gave at Satoshi Roundtable, he thinks we're winning because of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin strategy, which I think is a phenomenal loss and incorrect in a profound way. So, and he should have. Bruce learned about Bitcoin at the very same time I learned about Bitcoin, and it was from Roger. He had a post about that. He learned about it at the same time from the same place. Roger started the Bitcoin Foundation with 4 other people, and Bruce ended up becoming the chair of the Bitcoin Foundation at some point. And so the fact that he has not been absolutely publicly in support of Roger is horrible to me. But Roger, as I have mentioned several times, was the first investor and the second person involved in XRP, and the CEO of XRP, and none of the people from XRP have publicly come out and defended Roger. And so that pisses me off more than anything else. It because he took all of the risk, stuck his neck out there, and he's remained principled. And now all these other people are mooching off of what he created, and then not even defending him on something that, look, if you're a libertarian, there's no defense. There should be no defense or no moral argument at all, one way or the other. There's a taxation is theft, which isn't the case here. Roger actually did pay his tax and did, dot all of his I's and cross all of his T's, but nobody should be on the side of the IRS in this case, and particularly libertarians or people who are OGs who learned about Bitcoin from Roger. So It's frustrating.
What about have you had any contact with Patrick or America's First Legal?
No, I haven't talked to him about it. I mean, the stuff that he does is just like, whatever. He went off on the world would be a better place if he didn't leave and we focused on building a blockchain tech stack. I think all this other
Right.
stuff is just a gigantic diversion. So I haven't.
Well, they had to get rid of him. And I think Warren Buffett and his rabbi knew it, because you know what that digital overstock token was about to do, right? You heard how they settled that, right?
What do you mean?
The banks, he issued a digital token for 1 for 10. So, and for Overstock stock, and Overstock was the most shorted stock on the planet. People were paying 900 times cost to keep their shorts on. I remember when I used to download, and I probably still have them, when the SHO list first came out, when they first started publishing it daily. They were on that list for like 10,000, for forever, for 3 years straight. And the digital token would have forced all the shorts to cover. And so what happened is 3 weeks before that was going to be forced to happen, Patrick resigned. JJ then put in a 6 month, 3 or 6 month hold on it, and the banks allowed all the short sellers to close for cash.
Wow.
It was unbelievable what they allowed them to do. But it would have sent a shockwave of coverage. I mean, Overstock would have. You could not have covered. There's, it was so naked shorted that it would have just blown everything up. And
there's a really good video from, I don't know, a decade plus ago, where Patrick Berg gave a whole speech to a bunch of university students about naked short selling. So he's been a target by, Wall Street and the games they play for a long time.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I first learned about Patrick Deep Capture. Do you guys ever look at his website, Deep Capture?
Yep.
Back in I think it was 2008, 2009. He was with Mark. Somebody was a journalist writing all kinds of stuff about Wall Street, and I started reading that because that was right after the downturn, and I was working for a company, and I was getting paid in pink sheets. So that's when I started learning about stocks. Then after that was over, I didn't hear about him again. I didn't follow him again. I didn't pay much attention. And then I found Raven. I started following the the Free State Project before they got to the 20,000. I think there was only like 8,000, and I became a friend. I knew I wasn't going to move up there. It's too damn cold. But I became a friend of the movement, started supporting it all through that, and then found Ravencoin, and then found out that he started Ravencoin. I didn't even know he started Ravencoin in 2018 when I first found him. So it was kind of a strange coming back to him and what he's done. You're right. When he left and Medici Ventures is gone and all those tech stacks that he was working on are gone, that was the end of what I see as the biggest possibility we had.
It's probably the biggest rug pull in crypto that no one even knows about. And when you look at it, and I interviewed Steven Nerioff. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Steven actually was the lawyer who worked with T0 to come up with the legal structure for the security token. Prior to that, he was the lawyer for Ethereum when Ethereum was founded. And he actually created the first legal structure for the ICO. And so he was involved in Ethereum at a stage and to the point where he was trying to give them guidance on how to form a foundation and how to raise money legally. And so, this meant, I think they based it in Switzerland or whatever. And So it was important that Vitalik not be based in the United States. So Vitalik was staying at Stephen Nerioff's house. He also had an opportunity to have up to like 40% of the company consensus. And basically, he got cold feet because he saw, one, they weren't following his advice on how to properly and legally do the foundation structure. But then he also realized that there was one company in China that was essentially the largest holder of Ethereum and the largest buyer of the tokens. So at some point, it became clear that that China and that company had a friendly relationship with the then head of the SEC. And so at this point, you were in a situation where, all of a sudden XRP was considered a security, but Ethereum wasn't. And it turns out that the guy that was the SEC chair was making statements that basically, implied Ethereum was not a security. And then when he left his role at the SEC, he became a lawyer working on companies largely related to Ethereum. And so Nerioff had information about this and could have blown the whistle. He also could have blown the whistle on what went on with Patrick. And I actually think the story that you were just talking about with the token. And so the DOJ came in and arrested him, raided his home. 12 FBI agents came in, cuffed him, threw him in a van, and showed him a couple-page list and said, unless you give us information that leads to convictions, you'll never see your kids again. And it was a manufactured case. Now, on that list were Roger Ver, Patrick Byrne, Bruce Fenton, Naomi Brockwell. Like it's basically the intersection of crypto and liberty. Now, Nerioff ended up not caving in. The DOJ ended up dropping their case, and then he hired Alan Dershowitz, and now he's suing the government for like $9 billion for prosecutorial misconduct. But I had interviewed him a week after I interviewed Roger, and that's when I learned all of this stuff. And so he was completely tied in with Patrick and also tied in with this whole thing with Ethereum, which was kind of a wild story. But my point behind this is we now know through him that the DOJ was actively manufacturing cases and actively pushing people, trying to find dirt on people at the intersection of crypto and liberty as far back as, 2019 is when they actually raided his house, but we know it goes back certainly further than that. And so there's no mystery now as to whether or not they were trying to actively dismantle this. So they were absolutely trying to dismantle what Patrick was doing, and it's no surprise because then you learn when you study what was going on with CBDC development and the hijacking of Bitcoin, it actually overlaps that as well. When the Bitcoin Foundation collapsed, MIT took over, and MIT simultaneously funded kind of, SegWit and Lightning Network and things that cemented Bitcoin as not being useful for peer-to-peer digital cash, while then going on to fund all 3 U.S. CBDCs. So I think that there was actually a little bit more coordination here about, yes, what Patrick is doing is a threat to CBDCs and to what they're trying to build out, which is a platform where, the stock market, you have tokenized equities and that settle in CBDCs, and the tokenized equities have the same attributes as CBDCs. They're programmable and controllable. DTCCs is still going to be involved. All the same players are going to be involved. And so I think what we are witnessing here is truly a coordinated takedown. And if we're looking at it objectively, it was really successful. This is why on that space that I was on today, the thing that I've got to say is, like, we have to wake up. People want to say, well, on an optimistic note, I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but if you're going to be realistic about that, you have to assess you can win if you're putting your direction towards a solution that can win. But in order to do that, you have to have an assessment, an accurate assessment of what's going on. And what's going on is they destroyed a blockchain tech stack for civilization. They destroyed Bitcoin, and then they've been building all of these other things. So we're now at like, this is like the nuclear clock, right? We're like 90 seconds to midnight here, like running out of time, and people are sitting around like, well, it's going to take a long time. I think, maybe DeFi will come to, maturation in the next 7 years. And I'm like, we don't have 7 years. We don't even have the right game plan. We don't even understand what game we're playing.
Completely agree. We had all these parts and pieces open source 5, 6, 7 years ago. People were putting them together. you know, things were starting to be, 2018 was crazy. How many thousands and thousands of new coins and projects out there, but there were some good ones. The ones that survived for the next, 18 months, there were some actual good ones. And then COVID hit and everybody took their $1,400 check and pumped everything up to $67,000. And then, when everything else fell apart. I know almost every project that I saw people working on just stopped.
Yep.
It was amazing. I mean, one of the ones that you're talking about what Patrick was doing, I don't think it's even the CBDCs that were a lot of the stuff they were doing. Medici Land Ventures is one of the 20 companies they were developing, which I thought was fabulous because, I can't remember the guy's name, but he won the Nobel Prize in economics. He's a South American economist.
Yeah,
and and they were blockchaining your land, because if you can prove ownership, you can improve it. You can take loans out. You can get credit. When you have a stable titling system in a country, that absolutely leads to economic growth on the lowest level.
Yep.
And
real world assets that are transparent and proven. There's some value to that. The big challenge that a lot of the coins that you talked about, including Raven Coin, they did it the right way, where it was proof of work, and the founders didn't take a bunch of coins off the table. The downside when you do that is then you don't have any of those coins in reserve to do the payola that places like Coinbase want. I mean, the reason why Raven Coin never made it to Coinbase yet is because nobody was going to pony up the 100K plus that a place like Coinbase wants just to talk to you.
You're wrong. I mean, you're right on your concept and everything, but there was the money for Raven Coin. Raven Coin was never put on Coinbase, and I don't know the exact reason, but somebody at Coinbase has a hard on for Raven Coin, and they will never put Raven Coin on. But they gave, T0 gave the foundation $125,000 check when they said, after they, when we're no longer funding you, here's 125 grand. Believe me, the money was there to get on Coinbase, the one thing, and I don't know exactly why.
Well, and then Blockchain Tiger gave 100 grand or even more than that.
Yeah.
Which I you know what? I don't know if you guys remember. So I saw something. I posted something or I retweeted something, and somebody said he was dead. I don't know what happened to Blockchain Tiger.
There, I know some of the older saga on it because Adam Bull who's a good friend of mine and basically designed all their technology, and they kind of took from him. But yeah, something happened not recently. I guess it was. I'd have to ask Adam. I haven't talked to him in a little while. But yeah, the guy passed away or something. I think I did hear about it. It's been about like a year or 18 months ago.
So he really did. So that wasn't just somebody like joking around.
No, I'd have to ask Adam again. But yeah, I now that you said it, I think he discussed it with me.
I mean, I met with him. He actually, yeah, I met with him here in New Hampshire, and then I actually took him out to Bruce Fenton's for an afternoon to have a conversation with Bruce. So, God, that had to be 4 years ago, I guess.
No, that was probably more than that. It was probably like 2019-ish, right?
No, it wasn't 19. It was after. It was well, no. I was living in the place that I'm living in now. It can't. It was when the bull market was ramping up. So it was actually post-COVID. It was post-COVID because he was wearing a mask.
Okay.
So I think it was 21. Because 21 was when everything popped, and so.
Well, they got a big hack on their coin on their exchange.
Yeah, I never got all the details on that coin that they had, and I think there were a lot of people that were pretty mad at him, and I never never got the full deal. But you know, the fact that he died, he was a young guy.
Was he? Okay, I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't know how old he was.
So that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, there was money, although I don't know if the foundation would have spent it on that based on the mission of the foundation. I think that was more on development, but you know, which is a separate. The one thing that I've learned about this, it's one of the things I like about Zano that some people, you know, don't like, but you know, this idea of, oh, it's an open source project and it didn't do a fundraise, which was a popular tagline. I mean, that destroyed Bitcoin because that's what allowed all of these people from the intelligence community and then MIT and everybody else to come in and hijack it. So having no money is not a good thing. In fact, having no money is what stalled out Ravencoin.
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
And so, so projects. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to do an ICO, but I mean, if you have a, you know, Zano did a bit of a pre-mine, but they also have a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, so that they're basically staking their part of the pre-mine, so that they're actually using the coins that are earned from staking to fund ongoing development, which actually, upon reflection, is a pretty smart thing to have a system where you actually have ongoing funding, because that funding thing has been an absolute disaster for every one of these open source projects. And so I actually now view, I used to be on the side of no fundraise or no pre-mine as being a huge asset. Now it's like, you know, at the end of the day, these are projects that have people working on them. And the most important thing is the people. So, you know, okay, so Satoshi was anonymous, which actually they may turn out to be not a good thing, because you know, whether or not this was an NSA project or not, I mean, the fact that it's trackable is actually not great news. I think in retrospect, it would have been better if it were private. But to not know who the developers are, so many of these DeFi protocols have anonymous developers, and then something happens, and then there's a lawsuit, and then it turns out, oh, it's the same guy that did 3 other Ponzi schemes. And so there's a certain aspect of, you know, the people are important. You need to know who you're investing in, and if you have funds set aside, you know, they can be managed. They can be managed properly. So anyway, there's been a lot of learning. There's no like.
Well, let me ask, what do you think about the proof of stake versus proof of work in that?
So what I like, I always used to be against proof of stake, and I am against proof of stake in the way that it's done with Ethereum. And so initially it was a hesitation for me with Zano. It was because it was hybrid and it had proof of stake. And then when I looked into it, what I realized was the Ethereum model is, you know, it's kind of like an oligarchy. You have to have a certain number of coins to be able to stake and to earn rewards. So the problems are, one, that's really indistinguishable from kind of a Federal Reserve model. But two, because it's open, because it's a transparent network, you can find out who these large nodes are, which makes them subject to attack. What Zano does is a little bit different. It's actually private proof of stake, and you can stake any amount. So there are actually a couple of inventions there that are pretty big. I've also soured on, you know, it takes a while, particularly if you've been involved in it as long as we have, to really say, you know what, this isn't the end all be all. Yeah, this is the model that he came up with, but you know, now we're in this thing where proof of work is, you know, now it's like an arms race over who's going to spend more money to secure, you know, put hash power into the network. Well, what about if there are alternative models that are more secure, that don't require burning all of the energy? I mean, there are a lot of ways that Bitcoin can be defeated. Their security model, because of the very nature of itself, of how it works, it can be subject to a 51% attack. There may be other models that can be developed that don't even have that as a fundamental flaw to begin with. So I actually like the way that they're doing it, and it makes a lot of sense. And the combined model, and they just changed the consensus mechanism. You know, this is a model without a lot of participation that can actually turn out to be even more secure than Bitcoin. So I am not actually that impressed with Bitcoin. You know, on reflection, it was like one of those things where it was clearly an innovation at the time, but it wasn't, in my opinion, you know, Bitcoin is kind of like Alta Vista or InfoSeek in the search war game. And so many people are like, oh, well, you know, it's the dominant player. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But it can get blown out in an instant. And I think it's lack of utility and complete transparency, and then all of the hijacking and the funding and everything else, all of these things that people compare, everybody compares their project or their blockchain to Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works. And I've come to the conclusion that a lot of the things about Bitcoin are actually bugs, not features.
Well, Bitcoin is a prototype.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bottom line, and and that's what it is. Great base technology, great proof of concept. You know, in my mind, the technology that can, if used properly, secure individual freedoms throughout the world. But it's just the first iteration.
Well, it's the first iteration, and it could have, but it was hijacked, and all of these things happened. So that's not going to be the case with it. I mean, I found it interesting today. The conversation was, well, what other cryptocurrency will allow nation states to send value back and forth to one another? And I guess my viewpoint is, who cares about nation states sending value back and forth to one another? What about empowering individuals to be able to engage in voluntary trade anywhere in the world? That to me is an interesting problem. If your argument is that Bitcoin is good because it can allow nation states to exchange value, then I'm arguing that that's a problem that I'm not even interested in solving. But, you know, look, that it is what it is. The only frustrating part about that is that coming off of that space today, it's just there's not unity in any way, shape, or form in the idea that we need to be pushing peer-to-peer digital cash. And this is why I'm so adamant about like getting Roger out, because we need, you know, I'm doing I'm doing as much as I can, and I have been I've been more vocal about Zano than anyone on the planet. Basically, and you know, I mean, to the point where I saw this research report that somebody put out about Zano, and they made up a picture with me and Roger, you know, standing next to each other, you know, backing this thing. And I've tried to do everything that I can to educate people on it. But if Roger gets out and can speak about it, we'll get 100x kind of lift on this. And so it's important. Like, and this is why the Biden administration trapped him. Again, they trapped him because they know that he can be effective at introducing these types of things. And so so not only should he be out because it's the moral thing to do and because what they're doing is unconstitutional and wrong, but the reason that they're doing it is to have a chilling effect. And it has had a chilling effect. And I say to people when I do talks, you can't let these things have a chilling effect. Like, you in fact, take the chilling effect and reverse it. Let's make it a galvanizing effect. Let's make it so that every time the DOJ, the government, tries to do one of these things where it has a chilling effect, that it just backfires and it turns out to be a pivotal marketing event that actually stimulates adoption. That is what I think we should be doing. But people are afraid. People are afraid, unfortunately.
How do we get now payments point of sale back in the United States?
First of all, I've been using Now Payments. Is it not available in the United States?
Well, I know I know it wasn't. They weren't expanding, and they kind of got dropped but at one point when I was talking to them, you know, any merchant, I was going to get my chiropractor set up on it, and you can accept what they got, like 28. I don't know now. They had at that time like 28 different cryptos that they would accept and deliver to you either in fiat or the crypto of your choice as a merchant.
So I've onboarded people. Just last year I onboarded CanaSense. I had been using Now Payments. The problem is Now Payments, because they're in Europe, they're based in Amsterdam, and because of this MiCA rules and everything else, they're moving away from privacy coins. So my problem with Now Payments isn't that Now Payments works in the United States. I literally used it. This is what we used for my presidential campaign. This is, you know, I've used and I've introduced it to others. But if they're not going to work with privacy coins, and it sounds like they might even be, you know, putting Monero or something on the chopping block, then it's useless. It's a useless point of sale system, which actually I started going down this trap, and I don't necessarily want to do this, but I will do it if I have to. We need an open source point of sale system. And so I might fork AnyPay and you know, and put AnyPay out there as something that people can use, because BitPay was captured. BitPay, in fact, I haven't checked lately, but when I was going to set up my site to run for president and have an accept crypto, I was actually surprised at how hard it was. BitPay was not accepting new merchants at all, and Now Payments was the only real solution that I was able to come up with. And so the common problem here is, if you're a point of sale system, it's the fact that you're structured as a corporation. That AnyPay, that's what happened to AnyPay. When Ian Freeman was raided, they went after the AnyPay guys. They didn't have a warrant, but the AnyPay guys just fled New Hampshire and abandoned the project. BitPay has been captured, and now Payments is subject to these other rules. So we actually desperately now need a point of sale system. This is one of the limiting factors for P2P cryptocurrency adoption globally right now.
It's, yeah, I mean, you can have one written. They're not that difficult, but the clearing is where I see it. That's what I liked about Mile Payments. You could walk to, why couldn't every convenience store could basically use them, right?
Yeah, you could. Now the key to it is that Now Payments also is owned by the same company that owns Change Now. So the way so how the actual point of sale system works is, so as you said, they now have hundreds, but you as the merchant pick your single currency that you want to be paid in. And what they do is they use their own swapping service behind the scenes to handle that process. And that's actually where they make all of their fees. And so now there are options. I use Exelix, and there are others, but I use Exelix as a swapping service because it works with Zeno, it works with privacy coins, it's based, I don't even know what country it's based in. It's non-KYC, and that's important. So if you built a point of sale system, you could integrate that point of sale system with Exelix or some of the other swapping services out there, and that's what would allow you to deliver the same functionality as Now Payments. In fact, that's on my list to actively scope out next week, or actually before this weekend, and to see what we can do to build something like that, because it's going to be critical. We need a open source point of sale system, and we need a marketplace. And I like there's actually one coming out soon for Zeno, but we need a marketplace that based on a privacy coin, but that has escrow agreements, which will empower global commerce, private global commerce. And so those two things, that open source point of sale system and the marketplace, that is a game changer in terms of if your focus is on what I think is strategically important, getting people off of these central bank digital currencies and stable coins.
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty, you can make an LTC wallet that, my mother can use to go, point it at a QR code to pay her, her gas or her grocery bill. That's not too difficult. And I don't understand why it should have been adopted, in my mind, a heck of a lot earlier than it has.
They talked about that today on the X space, and basically it's like this has been suggested to BitPay multiple times. That's how AnyPay used to work. One of the demos for AnyPay is you would go into the shop, and these guys, the founders of AnyPay, actually opened a physical retail store in Portsmouth, New Hampshire called the Bitcoin Shop. And you could go there, and the deal was you could buy any of the products there, but it was crypto only. And what AnyPay allowed you to do is you would have one QR code, and you scan the QR code, and then it would, depending on which wallet you were using, and they had a whole bunch of cryptos that you would accept, you could scan one QR code, but have it kind of resolved to whatever crypto you were using. So if you had a Dash wallet and you scan the QR code, then it would work with Dash. If you had Bitcoin Cash or BTC, so they'd actually built that, and AnyPay was the most popular point of sale system in New Hampshire. There were all kinds of merchants throughout the state, but in Keene and Portsmouth and other places, like this had actually become a kind of a pretty popular point of sale system. And so what's frustrating about it is that we have absolutely regressed from that kind of adoption. Now, what Joel says, which is also true, is there are more options. So living on crypto, and as I think I indicated on the space, there are more options, but you have to, it's like your life is gamified. So it's like, okay, yes, there are more options. So when they shut down my BitPay card, which I was using with Bitcoin Cash, then now I have 4 other fallback options. The problem is I'm spending a lot of time staying on top of how all of this is moving. I mean, you can pay your bills with Spritz Pay. So you don't have to have a bank account, but you can go to Spritz Pay and pay your electric bill. You can pay your credit card bills. You can even pay your mortgage if the bank is connected to it. You can use Cake Wallet to buy gift certificates, and that's a good interim step, but it's not peer-to-peer digital cash, and those are big points of failure. So it's easier, but it's also it still has too many intermediaries, and we have to get to a point where people are engaging directly. And so anyway, the good news is we know what all the weak points are. The problem is I'm not sure where to start. I mean, I've been trying to kind of evangelize Zano, and then I realized that we need this gold-backed stablecoin. I don't even want to call it a stablecoin, gold-backed token, because the other limiting factor for merchants and merchant acceptance is they don't like the volatility of crypto, and that's actually another deterrent.
Well,
yeah.
When you're talking a point of sale system, are you talking about just on a computer? Or are you talking about one that's going to be on that you can put on a credit card machine?
I mean, I would start with I mean,
obviously, the web in a computer is easy.
I'd start with computers first, and then maybe you go on to something else. But right now, we just need like a basic marketplace and a basic point of sale system that you can integrate into WordPress and WooCommerce and what some of the other things are. That's the biggest bang for your buck. If you want to go to the next level, I mean, then you're talking other things that involve. So I would say you need an open source point of sale system that does those things. And then if other people want to build businesses that, do point of sale systems, I mean, maybe even get involved in hardware, doing some of those other things, then they can have at it. But you've got to make sure that the core point of sale system is open source and not subject to what has been, what hampers everybody else, which is being overregulated or shut out of business entirely by the government.
Yeah, how do you do that without having them put a gun to your head? Literally.
Well, I mean, again, if it's open source, so again, you got to put it out. If they put a gun to your head, it doesn't matter. It's out there.
Well, yeah, I know, but that who's going to look what they're doing to Roger. I mean, that's you really want to get these people are evil. They're doing this on purpose. I mean, this is absolute evil.
And they are evil, and they are doing it to Roger, which is why we have to stand up when he can't speak, and when we have to basically make this not palatable for them. But it is tough to get people to have the courage to stand up for it. But I think people don't realize what the risks are of not standing up, because if we don't do this now, then we are going to default into Agenda 2030. It might even be Agenda 2028 at this point. I mean, we could get this faster under Trump and Musk than certainly could have happened under Musk and Gates and Schwab, simply because they're more capable and they have more kind of crony ties to get it done. So trying to express the urgency of the situation, I mean, there's nothing stopping it technically. I mean, all of the pieces are in place. They just need to be put together, and it's hard when you can't. And I'll tell you, they've been. I look at something like. So people are like, oh yeah, Trump's the crypto president. Oh yeah, we're doing all this stuff on digital assets. Well, what have they done? They've made meme coins legal. So they basically made, lottery style gambling legal for the plebs, but you still can't buy or sell equities. A small business still can't sell equities. A small investor still can't buy equities. That's become more difficult. That has become more expensive. But because people don't even know enough about what all this means, they're buying the surface story that Trump is pro-crypto. In the meantime, they don't have any access to any of the things that are going to be the next game-changing thing. The only thing they get to do is participate in the next rug pull.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And the same thing on medicine. Like you went pretty deep into. I don't trust any of them. The doctors now. It's just not. It's hard. And my grandfather was a doctor, so it's not a profession that I've had a lot of mistrust in. I've had a lot of mistrust in their education and their knowledge over the years, but not as much now. I think it's. I don't trust their motivations anymore.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's their motivations. And by the way, I've never met a nurse that I think got into nursing because they wanted to hurt people. Most nurses get into it because they actually genuinely care about people. But that doesn't mean that they're not, at the end of the day, the ones that are administering the poison unknowingly because they trust the doctor, and then the doctor trusts, you know, the medical board and all of the and all of the certification and everything else. And so there's this, you know, so I'm not saying that they're bad people, but I'm saying we shouldn't listen to them. There's kind of a difference in, like, they need to wake up and they need to understand that what they've been doing is wrong so that they can take corrective measures. But in the meantime, we need to stop, you know, giving children the you know, all of these vaccines. We need to stop making people fat and sick with poor nutritional advice. We need to stop, you know, anybody that comes in with a lower back pain and giving them a full-blown opioid addiction. We need to stop, you know, all of it, right? And it starts by saying no to these people and not glorifying them. And then, you know, maybe yeah.
I heard a statistic: 9 million children have taken the latest booster in this country.
Wow.
I mean, it floors me.
Wow. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, it's horrifying.
I mean, we're lucky down here. We got. I think is probably the best Surgeon General in the country right now, and Joe Latipo, and he has he's been against it for a while. He's gone as far, you know, and he stopped. He told you don't need it for children a long time ago, and he stopped recommending it and suggesting highly against it quite a while ago.
Yep.
Yeah, it's scary. And have you seen the studies? I forget the guy's the doctor's name, but he's a pediatrician for 25 years, and he did a 10-year study on vaccinated and unvaccinated patients, and up until like 2 or 3, the trips to the doctors were equal, but after that, the vaccinated group for like the next 5 years. He was tracking 27 different reasons that kids came to the doctor: disease, asthma, you know, specific things. Every single one of the vaccinated kids kept tracking up, whereas the unvaccinated kids hit a certain level, 1 or 2 visits a year, and leveled off.
Yep.
On every disease. So it's, you know, and of course, whatever. That was a Dr. Salk that we mentioned, killed his grandkids with the polio vaccine.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this stuff, you know, this stuff has to get out, and again, there's no mechanism for it to get out. And then there's this, you know, in the way media is, there's what's polite, you know, there's kind of what you can say politely, and even what information, you know, the stuff that we're saying right now, you're not going to be able to say on you know, Tucker Carlson or whatever, but it needs to be said. Like, I think it needs to be just people need to take back control of their own lives in all ways. Take control of your health, take control of your money, and stop outsourcing it. These institutions have failed us, but at the end of the day, we are responsible for ourselves, and that message has to get out there. And I think fasting is a great kickstart for all of it, right? It's a great and, you know,
reset.
Hopefully by the time this is done, and, you know, I write a book about it or whatever, I can document and lay out the whole thing, and I start going through, you know, case by case, because I think we talked the other day, you know, Grok doesn't have data. None of these big AIs have any of the data, and when you ask it questions about it, it's giving you answers back to your question that it didn't have any data for. It just made a whole bunch of assumptions and then said, well, this probably isn't safe because, you know, the independent review board wouldn't allow this kind of thing to even be tested. Well, that's not an answer. And so, like the True Health, you know, water fasting clinic, and another one in Germany, other people have been collecting data on this for years. They have all kinds of health outcomes that have been measured. And so I actually even took some of that data and then threw it into Grok, and Grok was still trying to say, well, that doesn't mean this, you know, it's so, you know, so aggregating all of this information and making this case, and even putting together an AI and feeding it some of this alternative data, it's going to be eye-opening for people because of what their perceptions are on this. And yeah, it's a way to reboot. And then when you're in the best time and the best way Now, the fasting is worthless unless while you're in it and when you're focused and you're present and you're thinking about food and diet, unless you come out of it with a plan to change what you were doing previously. If you don't do that, then fasting is yes, it may temporarily, it may cure some things or fundamentally fix some things, but they'll come right back if you don't make the changes. And so this is why it's a good state to be in to, explain to people what public health is about and what these nutrition guidelines have been and that they're false. So I don't know how many people are gonna be interested in it. I do get the sense that most people, even people in the libertarian community, are kind of like they look at a fast like this as being, again, equating it more to starving or just some incredible suffering kind of thing, and not realizing the benefits of it.
It's not a pill that fixes you.
No, it's not Ozempic or anything like that either.
Yeah, freedom and liberty is not an innate thing. We have to learn those concepts.
I don't know if it's innate or not, or if it is innate, but it's programmed. I mean, we're programmed. So if we weren't programmed, where would we be? Because my view on this is when you do personal transformation stuff and then you start accessing your subconscious and you start realizing that, okay, this isn't my identity. This is something that happened to me that became part of my identity, but it can be changed. It can be rewritten. Usually when people go through that process, they come out of it in a state of, thinking that there are, unlimited possibilities, which to me, is a state of freedom. So when you wipe the slate clean of all of the programming, I think that state seems to be freedom.
At least a more clear mind.
A more clear mind, but usually people are like, oh, I can do whatever I want now. I've been limited. These are all of the self-limiting beliefs that I've had. These are all of the things that I have constructed my identity on based on a set of experiences, maybe some traumatic things and everything else. And so when you remove that, what's left is, infinite possibilities. So that is, in a sense, it's a clear mind, but it is also, it's freedom. It's the freedom to realize that you have the ability to choose what your destiny is going to be, as opposed to being a victim of your past experiences and programming.
Almost like the effects you get from some of the psychedelics is, I guess, what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like the effects, but some of the, psychedelics are a short-term thing. Something like ayahuasca, or maybe mushrooms in some case. What those do is, as best as I can describe them, this is certainly not biological, but they basically, and I view this is probably definitely not right scientifically, but the way that it feels, it's like you have energetic blocks, in your body, and it's like as the plant medicine is going through you, it finds those energetic blocks, and those energetic blocks will release, emotions and things that you may not be addressing consciously, but that are there subconsciously. That's how it feels when you're going through it. But I think that there's some truth to that, because I will say, when I did, not now, but when I did my 38-day fast before, when I was going through it, it's almost like, okay, like when you're losing weight and as you're burning that fat, it's almost like emotions were trapped in the fat, because when you're like, yes, it's releasing stuff, and like it was wild, like what was coming up. And so ayahuasca can help with that. There are a lot of ways you can do that. I mean, you can just meditate, you can do a whole variety of things. There are a lot of techniques to access kind of overriding those limiting beliefs, but and a lot of different mechanisms, and they work. But it's so liberating when you do it, because and a couple things happen. I mean, once you go through a fast like this, you have no fear. I mean, think about, but what is it that people fear the most? People fear, not having shelter, not having food, not having everything else. When you come out of something like this, and it's like, okay, I cannot eat for 40 days. You've displaced some of the things that have been built up in society that you've been taught to be fearful of. Oh, if you don't have 3 meals a day, you're going to be unhealthy. If you don't have access, if you don't have a 6-month supply store of food, you're not going to be safe. All of these other things, you just walk out of it, it's like, you know what, I don't care about any of this, which is another, another good benefit of it. But anyway, reduction of fear and being able to tap into your whatever your limiting beliefs are. Those are powerful, profoundly powerful tools.
Aaron, another great show. I'm going to bow out. It's getting about that time to.
Yep. Yeah.
me.
Same. Unless you have anything else. You have any,
Oh, good night. Good night, everybody. Good talking to you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for sticking around. Bye.
Good night.